Back then, competition among China's internet giants was absolutely brutal. Yiming Zhang, the founder of ByteDance, posted on WeChat Moments, WeChat's repeated blocking and Weishi's copycat tactics still can't stop Douyin. Pony Ma, Tencent's founder, was not having it. He jumped right into the comments. That could be considered defamation. And from that moment on, the money war was on.
So keep burning money.
Burning money? What are you talking about? 4 million yuan wouldn't even get you warmed up. The daily budget was 20 million. That's ByteDance for you. You don't get it. You can't learn it.
This is 半拿铁 Chinese Internet Stories, the ByteDance episode.
Hey everyone, I'm Liu Fei.
I'm Xiao Lei.
Alright, back to ByteDance. Before we start today's main story, let's do a quick round of quick-fire questions.
I'm ready, fire away.
Who makes more money in absolute terms? Tencent or ByteDance?
Tencent.
ByteDance. ByteDance has already pulled ahead by a meaningful margin.
Alright, I was wrong.
ByteDance is now the most profitable internet company in China. No qualifier needed. Next, what was Kwai originally built for? What was the product at the very beginning?
It started with images, pictures, and GIFs.
Right. It lets you turn video into GIFs. Back then, on forums, Weibo, and all kinds of social platforms, people loved posting GIFs. What Tencent product directly went head-to-head with TikTok?
Weishi, definitely Weishi.
Correct. Tencent is an exceptionally great company, and Pony Ma is the CEO I admire most. Who said that?
Jiang Yiming.
Zhang Yiming. Who was the first real business lead behind TikTok? The first person who actually got it off the ground?
On the overseas side? No idea.
Zhang Nan.
Oh, so they never replaced her. The way you asked it made me think there had been a handoff.
No handoff. I think a lot of people imagine TikTok as some totally separate business, but it actually grew out of the Douyin side. What was the first country where TikTok really took off?
Southeast Asia? I'm guessing somewhere like Vietnam.
Pretty close. The answer is India.
That is not actually that close.
Directionally, you were in the neighborhood. Alright, let's get to the main story. Part 1. The Campfire Era. When did the world's earliest short video products appear? Go on, take a wild guess.
Maybe in 2010?
Honestly, not bad. 2011. A product called Vidi was born in 2011, and it got hot fast because a bunch of celebrities invested in it. Justin Bieber, Will Smith, Jay-Z, Linkin Park, they all put money into it.
Right.
Exactly. The concept was simple. 15-second videos from day one with filters. You made something in the app and could instantly upload it to Facebook and Instagram. So fundamentally, it was a tool. A processing tool. In May 2012, Vidi raised $30 million and hit a $370 million valuation. Think about that. By 2012, there was already a short video product valued at $370 million.
And it had only been around a year.
And this was 4 full years before Douyin even existed. Which means 15-second short video existed very early. Early enough that it was basically already an industry standard. There was also SocialCam, built by one of Twitch's founders. At the time, SocialCam and Vidi got into a fierce fight. People called it the Instagram battle for video. In other words, the market believed there would be an Instagram-like social platform, but for videos. So by 2012, those two were already going at it hard. And then, they died together.
Wait, both of them?
Yep, because their fate wasn't in their own hands. They relied on Facebook for distribution. Facebook realized they were creating a ton of feed junk and also becoming a threat, so it changed the algorithm weighting. Before that, videos from those apps could auto-upload into Facebook. Once Facebook cut that off, both products died. Completely. They had no platform of their own. After that, Vidi's traffic dropped by 90%, and Instagram itself launched their 15-second videos. The logic was basically, oh, you're calling yourself the Instagram of videos? I am Instagram. Where exactly does that leave me? So Instagram entered the category too. Vidi got sold off for $20 million in 2014 and was shut down for good by the end of the year. That case taught a lesson later short video companies absolutely studied. You can't just be a tool. A product that only helps people make videos is not enough. You need creators, and you need your own content ecosystem.
Yep.
A lot of people, especially in China, forgot those failure stories later on. But they really did rise fast and die fast. If you depend too heavily on another platform, you can get killed in a heartbeat. There were others too, like Tao, and they died for similar reasons. Vidi also had another problem. A more formidable competitor showed up. That was Vine. The name even sounded a little like Vidi. Vine launched in June 2012. The founding team included Dom Hoffman, Rus Yusupov, and Colin Crow.
Not exactly household names.
Not household names, but known in the industry. They were New York founders, that whole New York school of startup people, not the Silicon Valley kind. So the team had this built-in elite vibe. It made sense for short video. They were very, how do I put it, people who knew how to have fun in a big city way.
Like luxurious fun?
Exactly. Neon lights, nightlife, urban energy. That kind of content made people feel like they were looking at a real entertainment life.
Not outdoor adventure fun.
No, not that. And Vine videos were extremely short, just 6 seconds, and they looped automatically. Kind of like a GIF with audio.
Oh.
So the bar for consumption was low.
And the bar for creation was low too. That matters.
Very much so. Vine's test version caused a huge stir, but if you look at the earliest interface, it's very different from modern short video apps. It looked a lot like Instagram. That's because it was explicitly designed against Instagram. Square format, an aspect ratio of 1:1, not full screen. You'd scroll upward, but the video didn't take over the whole display. That's a classic first-generation short video product. The video occupied maybe half the screen, not all of it. More like early Weibo or RedNote than today's TikTok-style feed.
So basically, it was still being treated like a photo.
Exactly. And Vine got acquired before the full version even launched. The beta came out, the industry got excited, and boom, it was bought.
Strong momentum.
Twitter bought it. Jack Dorsey paid $30 million and turned it into Twitter's short video module, which makes intuitive sense. Microblogging and short video fit pretty naturally. But the founding team got pushed out quickly, and Vine's death was incredibly dramatic. At the end of 2015, Vine's top 18 creators held their own little summit in Hollywood and basically said, "We're broke. We can't survive like this. Why isn't the platform supporting us?"
Did they all threaten to leave?
They asked management to pay them, straight up. The platform had to pay each of them $1.2 million, about $21 million in total, and in return, they'd guaranteed 12 original posts per month.
Wow.
Twitter said no, so they left. For Instagram, for YouTube, and Vine lost a huge portion of its top creators. And those creators mattered. Vine shut down in 2016.
No negotiating with terrorists, huh? Then the terrorists walked.
This is quite interesting. In China, we've also seen top creators leave a platform, but usually someone is organizing it behind the scenes or actively poaching them.
Right, someone pulls them over.
In the US, it feels more self-organized, very union energy. So Vine too was one-hit wonder. Then, in 2013, 4 college students in Paris, now the story moves to France, started working on a startup in a basement near Gare de Lyon. The key figure was Grégoire Henrion. They studied Vine closely and realized something important. Among Vine's many features, one of the most effective was pairing video with music.
Too many names, man.
But the point matters. Add music, and even an ordinary little clip suddenly feels like something. Same idea as those social media trends where you take a random photo, slap music on it, and suddenly it feels like an album cover.
Instantly more premium.
Exactly. So they started thinking about how to pair clips with music. That immediately raised copyright issues, especially in the US, where rights were already being taken more seriously. Then they noticed something beautiful. The iTunes Store had 30-second previews for every song, and they didn't need anything longer than that. They only needed 6 seconds because they were still basically copying Vine's duration. Perfect. But then came the really important innovation. They realized Square Video no longer fit the new generation of bigger phone screens. So why not just make it vertical? That change was massive, one of the most important changes in the entire history of short video.
Because up to that point, all those earlier products were square.
Exactly.
Some earlier video products had been horizontal even before that, so square already felt like progress compared with all video.
Right, which is why doing vertical in 2013 was incredibly counterintuitive. People consumed visual media through TV and film. Everything was 16:9 or 4:3. When this product launched, plenty of media people and big company veterans mocked it. There was even a term at the time: vertical video syndrome. The idea was that vertical video felt wrong, almost physically uncomfortable. People were used to wide frames, so vertical looked cropped, narrow, incomplete, like something had been taken away from you. A lot of experts were convinced it would fail. Who would ever watch vertical video? Of course, now we know that change became completely normal. These days, people even shoot vertical dramas in Hangdian, China's Hollywood.
And if you also put text overlays on the frame, it felt even less proper back then.
Totally. I remember seeing it early on and thinking it looked weird too. But that mental resistance just got beaten out of us through repetition. People watched more of it, they got used to it, and the discomfort disappeared. This was not just about occupying more screen space, though that helped by making the experience more immersive and by allowing the video to take over the phone display. There was another huge advantage people often miss. You no longer had to rotate the phone. With older horizontal video, if it was shrunk down and you wanted to see it clearly, you had to turn the device. That little action is a real cost. A lot of mobile viewing happens on the subway, in line, out on the street, moments when you just want to glance at something quickly. Vertical solved that. You could hold the phone upright, scroll upright, and keep going. That was a milestone.
And it was 4 guys in Paris who did it.
They rebuilt the format around the full-screen 9:16 frame. And once the video filled the screen, the surrounding information had to be compressed. A simple title at the top, the creator name, a like button, a share button. That basic structure more or less defined what short video products still look like today.
So from the very beginning, they compressed the extra information.
Right. If you look at what they built in 2013, it's honestly not that different from what we see now. The only obvious difference is that because the app emphasized music, the square in the upper right corner was album art.
Honestly, it's even cleaner than what we are used to now.
It really is. This was the prototype for today's short video UI. Not TikTok, not what people later credited to Musical.ly. The French guys built it first. Their product was called Mindy. Mindy quickly got attention. In December 2013, Henrion demoed it at the Le Web conference in Paris. Back then, Paris could still host internet events that mattered. The demo already looked basically like the product we just described. They even stretched the maximum clip length from 6 seconds to 7. Then they raised $1.2 million and prepared to move to the global center of the internet, to the US West Coast, to California. At that point, Mindy looked like it would be one of the finalists in the short video era. But if one finalist was Mindy, the other came from China. Zhu Jun was born in Anhui in 1979. Among that generation of internet founders, he was on the older side. He entered Zhejiang University in 1996 and graduated in 2000. If you look at his LinkedIn, the first company he joined after graduation was already an internet company. And remember, this was Hangzhou in 2000. There weren't many real internet companies there. It was China Yellow Pages.
My God.
So yes, Zhu Jun worked under Jack Ma for 2 years, although a lot of people probably don't know that. They know Zhu Jun was in Hangzhou, but not that he spent 2 years with Jack Ma working as a designer at China Yellow Pages. In 2002, he joined WebEx, the video conferencing company that Cisco later acquired. Plenty of people from big companies and foreign firms have probably used it. I think when we used to meet with Apple, we were on WebEx too. A lot of large companies relied on it.
Oh, wow.
Then, in 2004, he joined SAP, the world's largest ERP company and one of Europe's most valuable tech firms. There's a line you hear all the time: 77% of global transactions pass through SAP systems.
No wonder world's largest.
Meaning, if SAP's systems went down, the global economy would be in serious trouble. Zhu Jun became a user experience manager there, then later joined a domestic insurance tech company called Yibao Tech as a product director. And at Yibao Tech, he met Yang Luyu. Yang Luyu was from Hunan. His college entrance exam scores were extremely strong. At a top high school, he was top 5 in the whole school. But he insisted on applying to Peking University for astrophysics.
Oh no.
The cutoff was high, he didn't get in, and he was reassigned to Central South University instead. But Yang wasn't the stable, obedient student type anyway. He was always busy with startups in college. In 2000, he founded Sinno.com, became a campus celebrity, and even won a provincial outstanding graduate honor in his province, despite not actually getting his diploma because he hadn't completed enough credits.
So he got the honor but not the degree.
Exactly, very two-system behavior. After Sinno failed, he launched another venture in 2005, selling custom t-shirts. That idea was in the air at the time, same wave Wang Xing and Wang Kuiwen once wanted to ride.
So that trend really blew through a lot of people.
It did. That failed too, and then Yang joined Yibao Tech. There, he and Zhu Jun hit it off immediately. Zhu Jun wasn't happy there. In 2012, he posted on Twitter, "It's time to let go and start doing something meaningful. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. So how do you make life an adventure?" In 2013, they left Yibao Tech to start a company and launched a product called Cicada. Their thinking was, we're entering the mobile internet era. Content is getting more fragmented. Attention spans are getting shorter. Very similar to the logic Zhang Yiming had elsewhere. So they launched short courses. The future, in their minds, wasn't sitting through tens of hours of lessons. It was learning something in a few minutes.
Master a skill in just a few minutes.
Exactly. Beautifully shot, bite-sized video lessons. Maybe that sounded plausible from where they were sitting at the time, because there really was a trend around online education. Coursera was booming, MOOCs were booming, and people were saying maybe universities themselves would matter less because everybody would learn online. Zhu Jun and Yang Luyu thought, Coursera is too long. That's already the previous generation. We need short courses.
Too long.
So maybe tea ceremony has 100 knowledge points. Fine. Make each one 2 or 3 minutes and break it down clearly. It was a little like paid knowledge content before that fully became a category. They were building a platform, though of course in the beginning they had to make some of the content themselves.
So not just the courses, the platform too.
Right. From their perspective, coming out of enterprise software and B2B work, this kind of solid education business made sense. Cicada raised $250,000 and launched a lot of courses, each only a few minutes long. But it ran into a huge problem. Look at Vine or Vidi. Creators flooded in because the barrier to creation was low. But education doesn't work like that. If you're teaching someone something real, a random UGC user can't just throw it together. The production threshold is extremely high. Even internally, Zhu Jun's team could spend a month or two making a few-minute lesson and still not be satisfied, then need several more months. So how is an ordinary user supposed to do it?
Content production becomes the bottleneck.
Exactly. That's one reason entertainment later became the dominant content type on short video platforms. It's not that people inherently love making entertainment more than everything else. It's that entertainment is much better suited to the format. Education is not.
They also didn't cut into some niche content like cooking.
And there was another problem. The barrier to consumption was high too, not just the production side. Learning is anti-instinct for most people. You open an app and think, wait, I have to study? I have to sit here patiently for several minutes? Most people don't want that. If the first thing you see is a cat falling off a stool, that's instant stimulus. If the first thing you see is, today, let me teach you a craft, that's much less compelling.
Requires much more systematic work from the user.
Right. Even apps like 得到 have had ups and downs over the years because learning fights human nature. To work, it has to be packaged in a much more digestible way. So when Cicada's money was almost gone, they'd raised very little to begin with, and only about 8% of the $250,000 was left. They looked at the remaining cash and thought, if we return this to investors, it barely means anything. We might as well use it responsibly and pivot.
Build something new.
Completely embrace the market. Make what the market actually wants. Stop holding on to this high-minded insistence that it has to be education. According to Zhu Jun's own later retelling, one day he was sitting on a Caltrain from San Francisco to Mountain View, packed with teenagers. He observed that about half were listening to music, and the other half were taking photos and shooting video. And some were even turning on their speakers to add music. He concluded, teenagers are obsessed with social media, photos, video, and music. Could we combine those three powerful elements into one app and build a music video social network? It makes for a great legend. But the product they built looked almost exactly like Mindy, which came first. If you read later retrospectives by the Musical.ly team, Mindy basically disappears from the narrative. They never really mention it, but they absolutely studied it. That's as close to certain as you can get. Mindy was already hot by then. That doesn't mean Zhu Jun's insight was meaningless. It just means the real story is that they combined that observation with what Mindy had already shown. And in only 30 days, they built the new product. In April 2014, Mindy's biggest rival entered the stage, Musical.ly. Why the name Musical.ly, music.ly? First, musical stands for music plus social, and .ly was a domain suffix that had a bit of trend value at the time. It gave things a dynamic feel. Then there was an extra coincidence. ly also echoed Yang Luyu's initials in Chinese, so the founder's name happened to fit the brand. And on top of that, .com domains were expensive. .ly was Libya's country domain, and because of the circumstances there at the time, those domains were relatively cheap, so people snapped them up. It's the same logic as .ai today. People assume .ai is some tech industry suffix. It isn't. It's a country code for Anguilla. Anguilla used to make money off sea salt and lobster. Then AI blew up, and domain registration and renewals became so lucrative that they started making up 20 to 30% of the government's total annual revenue.
Sitting at home while money falls from the sky.
Exactly. But back to Musical.ly. It really did look a lot like Mindy. Mindy co-founder Stanislas Copin later said they were genuinely shocked at first. Everything looked the same, right down to the App Store description, the logo colors, even the gradient treatment.
Hard to blame them for complaining.
If you put the two side by side, the resemblance is obvious. The product was simple enough that if one or two major elements matched, the whole thing felt nearly identical. Musical.ly changed a few details. The album art square became more like a circular CD icon. Placement of buttons shifted a bit, but the overall structure was extremely close. Now here's the important part. People often imagine Musical.ly as a Chinese startup that was always trying to go global and compete with Mindy overseas. That's not actually how it began. The founders first saw the Mindy opportunity and thought there should be room for it in China too, especially among Chinese teenagers. So they initially wanted the China market, but China didn't respond. Yang Luyu later put it this way: it wasn't that we chose the American market chose us. Their own explanation was simple. Why didn't Chinese teenagers use this kind of product then?
Too much homework.
Exactly. No time. Yang's later analysis was that American middle school and high school students simply had way more free time. They had huge blocks of leisure. In most parts of China, secondary school students were incredibly busy, especially high school students. Even in places where the pressure wasn't as brutal as in Shandong or Henan, kids still weren't just casually spending all day making and watching short videos.
Please stop looking down on southern China.
Some southern kids suffered too. Now, some listeners might think Musical.ly failed in China because the name itself was awkward or too Western, but that's not it. In China, it didn't even use that name. It had a Chinese name. And the name was kind of unhinged. It was called Mamma Mia.
Wow,
Yep, Mamma Mia.
that is extremely down to earth.
Honestly, for me, it crossed into too much. Back then, people in the industry didn't really talk about Musical.ly. They talked about the overseas version of Mamma Mia.
That is a complete reversal.
Exactly. In people's minds, the company was doing Mamma Mia. Then Mamma Mia didn't work, and Musical.ly started taking off.
As a mother and baby brand though, that name would be fantastic.
Probably. If you search it now, I think there may actually be a maternal and baby platform with a similar name. And remember, this was very early. Today, when we talk about Chinese companies going overseas, everyone's interested. It's a major theme. But in 2014, investors heard Chinese founders building for overseas users and immediately thought impossible. Back then, the pattern was still copy to China, not China to the world. There were no real success stories. Not even WeChat had become that kind of case yet, let alone something like DeepSeek.
So there was no precedent.
None. Investors told Zhu Jun and Yang Luyu, if you can name even one Chinese startup that successfully built a business overseas, we'll invest. They couldn't. There wasn't one.
Brutal.
So they just kept going. No money, but some user traction. And already a much better product direction than the short course platform. One thing they did exceptionally well was listen to users. Early versions of the app had a very visible place where people could email complaints or praise. Zhu Jun, who was the product lead, read those emails every day. He also created a bunch of burner accounts and went around asking users directly, why do you like this app? Why don't you use it? Why haven't you posted lately? He even built an early user group and chatted with them constantly. If we add this feature, do you want it?
So they were basically doing old school Ponyma user research.
Exactly. And it paid off immediately. Their first major adjustment was changing the maximum clip length from 7 seconds to 15. That was huge. 7 seconds couldn't carry enough. 15 seconds held more information and worked better for both consumption and creation. Then there was growth. Musical.ly started thinking early about how to grow and used all kinds of growth hacking tactics. One of them was ASO, App Store Optimization. And what did that mean in practice? Something very simple. Rename the app. Listen to this sentence. Musical.ly lets you make super cool music videos with Instagram and Facebook Messenger effects. That wasn't the app description. That was the app name. The full name was stuffed with searchable keywords so that if people searched Instagram or Facebook, Musical.ly would show up.
And that actually worked?
It absolutely worked. Very effectively. At the time, it was considered a classic ASO tactic, though today big products would look bizarre doing something that blatant. They also looked for viral challenge formats where users felt they could participate. The most famous example was the 2014 Ice Bucket Challenge, which people in China also remember. It was meant to raise awareness for ALS. You dumped ice water over your head, posted a video, and tagged 3 friends to do the same.
That thing was everywhere. 人人, Weibo, all of it.
Totally. Zuckerberg tagged Bill Gates. Gates did it. So did Tim Cook, Musk, Bezos, LeBron, Lina, Kobe, Messi, Lei Jin, Ponyma, Robin Lee, everybody. Musical.ly benefited from that wave. They didn't invent the challenge, but once they saw a challenge forming on the platform, they amplified it.
Adding fuel to the fire.
And they kept lowering creation friction. Open the camera, record immediately, edit quickly, upload quickly. The full workflow stayed cheap and clear. That also shows the natural selection process of short video. Knowledge sharing and premium educational content just don't spread as easily in that format. History chose entertainment and youth culture, stuff with a low barrier, easy participation, music, energy, and challenge formats that anyone can imitate. Because the company was short on cash, they kept a tight grip on costs. At one point, the whole team was only 7 people.
Very lean.
Then, Musical.ly spotted another opportunity, a German social video app called Dubsmash. At the time, European social products could still matter internationally. Dubsmash's distinctive feature was lip sync.
Basically, what later became 小咖秀 in China.
Exactly. And lip syncing spread fast because it solved the same problem we've been talking about. How do you get lots of people to participate? The Ice Bucket Challenge still had a threshold, so did dance or talent videos. But if I hand you a famous movie line or a famous music video clip, and all you have to do is open a camera and mouth the words, anyone can do that. Dubsmash hit number 1 on the German App Store in just 7 days. It exploded globally, beating YouTube and Facebook in download rankings across dozens of countries. And then it faded just as quickly. Why? Because it got hot too fast to catch the users. There wasn't even a user account system. You couldn't really register. It was a pure tool. You made a clip, exported it, and posted it elsewhere. Every user leaked out. The team didn't have the time or capability to build the social layer quickly enough.
They just didn't see it coming.
Right. No friend graph, no interaction, no retention. By the time they finally tried to build those things, the users had already been absorbed by other platforms. Musical.ly saw the lip sync feature and added it too. At first, not much happened. Then, in April 2015, one of America's big late-night shows, Jimmy Fallon's show, ran a lip sync competition segment. Suddenly, lip syncing looked fun on television. Viewers went to the App Store, searched for it, and Musical.ly ranked near the top. Downloads surged. Musical.ly reacted quickly and even pushed lip sync harder in the app name so people could find it more easily. It jumped from somewhere in the 1,000+ ranks into the top 100. Then in July 2015, another gift fell from the sky, the Don't Judge Me challenge. That format is familiar now. It's basically a contrast beauty video. For the first few seconds, you look messy or unfashionable, then you wipe across the screen or use a big transition, and suddenly you're glamorous. It's extremely satisfying to watch, and it spread virally because lots of people wanted to make their own version. That challenge pushed Musical.ly all the way to number 1 on the US App Store. It was the first truly massive breakout. Videos under the Don't Judge Me tag racked up nearly 1 billion views across social platforms. That was national-level trend status in the US. By then, Musical.ly had the power to create superstar influencers of its own. There was a completely ordinary 14-year-old girl in the US whose username was Baby Ariel. She started by lip syncing, got selected by the platform, and took off fast. Her followers jumped from tens of thousands to the 100,000s. Baby Ariel made Times Magazine, landed on Forbes influence lists, started releasing music, started acting. She became a top-tier American influencer. And the platform's logic for creator support was interesting. Zhu Jun's strategy was very different from platforms that obsess over long-tail fairness. Musical.ly explicitly allowed the first wave of users to blow up first. It sounds very Chinese, honestly. Very much the strategy of a Chinese startup. Push traffic heavily to a small group, make them famous fast, and then let them pull everyone else upward. A line like, let some people get rich first, and then let them lift the rest, basically captures it. Baby Ariel was exactly that kind of case. And look at her age. That tells you something essential about Musical.ly. The user base skewed incredibly young. Baby Ariel was 14 when she blew up, 15 when she crossed 10 million followers. At the time, most of the top 10 creators on the platform were between 13 and 16. In your 20s, you were basically old. I think the oldest person in the top 10, or maybe top 20, was 30. That youthfulness was a huge reason the platform stayed so lively. Teenagers love to play. They have fewer psychological barriers to posting than older users do. Once that energy built, it also made it easier for celebrities, Lady Gaga and others, to join. In May 2016, Musical.ly raised $100 million, passed the $500 million valuation, and reached 50 million monthly active users, mostly in North America and Europe. It became one of the most famous examples of a successful Chinese company going overseas, and Zhu Jun and Yang Luyu became well known in venture circles. Beyond creator strategy, there was another crucial idea. Zhu Jun used a metaphor, moving from brush to canvas. The German product was a brush, a tool. People used it, saved the result, and uploaded it to Facebook or YouTube. but that you can't be a tool, you have to become the canvas too. Kwai had made that transition too, from tool to platform. Musical.ly started more as a tool. Create here, one-click upload to Facebook. But the team saw very clearly that if they wanted to become the next Instagram, they had to emphasize interaction. They spent enormous energy on user accounts, comments, and social features that made people actually stay inside the app.
The ecosystem, the feedback loop.
Exactly. Because once I post here and people comment here, I have a reason to remain here as a creator. And from the consumer side, if you want users to watch content on your platform, that content has to be more compelling there than it is on YouTube or Facebook. That connects to one of Yang Luyu's most important theories. In 2017, he described 3 content distribution models for internet platforms. First, subscription. I only see people I follow. That only helps you discover maybe the best 1% of content. Second, social follow plus search. That gets you maybe 30% of the good stuff, but the remaining 70%, the long tail, still doesn't surface. So how do you find it? Personalized recommendation. His point was that only personalized recommendation can discover everything. Earlier editorial systems work more like portals. Only the most polished or elite content got seen. Yang's exact percentages aren't the important part. The structure is.
Right, the trend makes the logic clear even if the numbers are illustrative.
And he saw this early. In 2017, he was already saying Musical.ly had to embrace personalized recommendations. People forget that a lot of short video products back then weren't endless swipe machines. They behaved more like magazines. You checked trending lists, celebrity content, editorial picks. It wasn't the fully immersive feed we imagine now. Yang realized recommendation could make the platform break out further because parents and kids want different content, and each could have their own feed.
Different feeds for different people.
Exactly. That's the ideal version, which is, of course, also what Zhang Yiming believed. And yes, this is supposed to be the ByteDance episode, but we're still not getting to ByteDance yet. We need to finish Musical.ly first.
Fair enough.
Before that big 2016 round, fundraising had been hard for Musical.ly for all the reasons we mentioned. Nobody believed in Chinese startups building overseas, and the founders' backgrounds didn't look especially sexy to investors. They came from insurance tech and enterprise software, not the classic hot internet giant lineage. Zhu Jun was older. He'd done SaaS and B2B. That made some investors think, okay, whatever. There was also the standard question people always ask with consumer internet products. Where's the moat? What's stopping Tencent, Weibo, or any giant platform from doing the same thing? It looked like a category with low technical barriers. So Yang Luyu had to spend a lot of time working the room, getting FaceTime with investors, and he ended up joining a startup competition that looked a bit like today's entrepreneur variety shows. Big-name founders leading teams, contestants being cut round by round, somebody winning in the end. He joined Fu Sheng's team because Fu Sheng looked like one of the best bets for backing an overseas play. And then he got eliminated in the first round. Apparently, Luo Zhenyu was one of the judges, and he comforted Yang by saying, "Don't worry, the ones who get knocked out of these competitions often end up succeeding," which in this case turned out to be weirdly prophetic. After getting to know the team better, Fu Sheng did invest, but on very harsh terms. Cheetah Mobile put in 5 million RMB for 20% of the company, demanded veto rights, priority on outsourced business tied to overseas expansion, and terms so strict that under certain conditions, if the money ran out, Yang could even end up personally liable for repayment.
That's exactly the kind of thing founders warn each other about now.
Absolutely. Fu Sheng's methods have always been considered aggressive and somewhat controversial in the industry. But regardless, that 5 million RMB was life-saving money. Once they had it, and once the metrics improved, they gradually raised another $10+ million. Since they were focused mainly on North America, they also recruited a North America president, Alex Hoffman, who had previously been above Zhu Jun at SAP. The North American office, operations, and local understanding of teenage users in the US all depended heavily on him. You needed an American operator on the ground. By 2017, Musical.ly had funding and solid numbers. So what happened to Mindy, its old rival? It was gone.
Why?
In simple terms, Mindy moved too slowly. Musical.ly adapted fast. Creator strategy, challenge culture, feature iteration, all of it. Mindy, even after multiple waves had passed, was still centered on music lip syncing and hadn't really evolved. And in 2014, Apple removed Mindy from the App Store because it had been scraping those iTunes previews we talked about. Apple was furious. You using our music previews without paying us a cent. So the interface got cut off.
And Apple only decided to care after all that time?
Maybe there had been negotiations in between, but the broader point is this. If you don't adapt, and if your core business still carries legal or product risk, you're in trouble. Mindy also failed to make the same brush to canvas transition. Like Dubsmash, it remained a tool. Use it and leave. No real feed, no real ongoing consumption. Eventually, Twitter acquired it, and by 2016, it too was shut down. At that point, Musical.ly had almost no real rival left. In short-form video, it was effectively the global king. And then, the team looked back toward China and realized something had changed. They'd assume China didn't have the soil for short video. But after a few years, that no longer looked true at all. Which brings us to part 2. But before we go there, look at Zhu Jun's image for a second. In the Chinese internet world, he's genuinely well known, partly because of his vibe. Some people even called him the poet of the internet. He doesn't look like a typical internet founder at all.
He's a long-haired guy who'll wear a scarf indoors even when it looks like spring or summer. Very artsy.
Very artsy. At conferences, he dressed a little more conventionally, but inside the company, he apparently looked almost Taoist. Big robe, long hair, sometimes streaks of gray, wooden clogs. He liked writing poetry and describing his ideas in highly romantic language.
Which really doesn't match the business he was building on the surface. That contrast is strong.
Meanwhile, Yang Luyu looked much more like what you'd expect from a startup founder.
Exactly. The contrast between the two of them was huge. One looked like an artsy mystic. The other looked like a straight-up IT guy with a perm.
Alright, into part 2, the Laotie era. I think that chapter title is pretty good. Usually people say the Iron Age. Here is the Laotie Age.
Well, yeah, because everybody knows you're about to talk about Kwai.
So, when Musical.ly was founded in 2013, what was Zhang Yiming doing? Honestly, nothing related to short video. The people making moves in short video were a completely different group. First, there was Su Hua, born in 1982 in Xiangxi, Hunan. It was an extremely closed-off place. When he was born, the village didn't even have electricity yet. Supposedly, if you wanted to buy soy sauce, you had to walk 2 hours on dirt roads into town. Later, when the family situation improved, they moved into the county seat, and at home, they got a little Tyrant console, basically a Chinese Nintendo knockoff. For most of us, that was a game machine. For Su Hua, it was actually a learning machine. He used it to learn programming. People later said, "Wait, I don't remember there being any programming software on that thing." That's because you bought the pirated version. The legitimate version actually did include a basic coding program. Most kids just play the games. Su Hua pulled it out and started learning to code.
I honestly never even owned one.
Su Hua did, and it was his first contact with programming. Then, in 2001, he crushed the college entrance exam, got into Tsinghua, and by 2005, Google offered him an annual salary of 150,000 RMB. That amount absolutely blew his mind. When he first got to school, he was already shocked that graduating seniors could make 100,000 a year. He hadn't even imagined he personally could earn that much.
In 2001?
Right. So when Google offered 150,000, he basically dropped out. No diploma, just straight to work. He even got to spend a year working in Silicon Valley with Google, which obviously broadened his horizons. Then, in 2008, right as the financial crisis hit, he decided he couldn't wait anymore and had to go start something. Unfortunately, the thing he picked, a video ad system, was way ahead of its time. It was a very B2B product. It went nowhere and failed. The next year, he went back to work, this time at Baidu, as a systems architect on the Fengchao advertising platform. By then, he was making over 1 million RMB a year. But for a guy like Su Hua, money had stopped being the main thing. He wanted to do something bigger. In April 2011, he left Baidu and started up again. This second company was related to search, and it also didn't really work out. In the end, he and his partners sold the technology to Alibaba. They probably made some money, but not some life-changing amount. Su Hua later said that by that point, he had already done 33 startup projects. The ones we've mentioned are just a few of them. According to him, all 33 had failed.
Ouch.
Then in 2013, he started project number 34. The setup came from Zhang Fei at Morningside Capital. Zhang Fei basically put the match together. Su Hua understood tech, so he paired him with someone who understood product, Cheng Yixiao, the guy later nicknamed the Zhang Xiaolong of Tiantongyuan.
There he is.
That nickname originally came from an old article by Lao Bianji. At the time, it was still a very open question whether Cheng Yixiao could actually become a Zhang Xiaolong level product figure. Later, the phrase just stuck and became a kind of industry in-joke.
All right, people say it half jokingly now.
So where was Cheng Yixiao from? Liaoning Tieling, Zhao Benshan's hometown. Cheng was quick-minded from childhood. At one point, he collected rental passes from a comic book room near school, then turned around and marked them up and sold them to classmates. Supposedly, at his peak, he had more than 30 RMB in cash in his pocket and couldn't sleep at night because he was afraid someone would steal it.
Too excited to sleep.
Exactly, excited. He also loved writing. I've noticed a lot of good product people really love writing.
True.
As a kid, he wrote fiction, and some of it actually got published. He made 200 RMB in manuscript fees. He graduated from Northeastern University in 2007, went to HP, then jumped to Renren in 2009. So, by chance, he got into mobile internet very early. Renren began to decline, and in 2011, Cheng left and started his own company in Tiantongyuan. The first product he made was GIFQuai. The name GIFQuai basically meant make gifts fast.
Or quick hands, literally.
Right. A lot of people think GIFQuai and the later Quai were two totally different products. They weren't. It was the same product, just transformed so dramatically that it felt like a different one. I used to think the same thing. Wait, didn't Quai used to be that GIF tool? That can't be the same app. But it was. So then Cheng met Su Hua through Zhang Fei's introduction. Sparks flew. At first, Su Hua didn't immediately jump in. He wanted to evaluate it. Even though he modestly talked about those 33 failed projects, quite a few of them had actually made money, and in 2013, he had lots of ways to keep earning. He'd been a Baidu systems architect. Back then, top technical people were much scarcer than they are now. If you came out of Baidu at that level, you could pick up outside consulting work non-stop.
So he definitely wasn't broke.
Not remotely. In 2013, he was consulting on recommendation algorithms for a bunch of companies. That included Toutiao. He was already close to Zhang Yiming then, and Quai too. Quai was literally his client. After looking carefully, he decided he could work with Cheng Yixiao, and together they turned GIFQuai into a short video product. By then, he had already seen that short video plus recommendation algorithms had huge potential. Cheng was also very sincere. Even though he was the original founder, he gave Su Hua's side half the equity. Morningside had 20%, and of Cheng's 80%, half got split to Su Hua. Morningside also gave up some. In practice, Su Hua later ended up with even more equity than Cheng. He had 50%. Cheng also said, "I'll focus on product and business. You become CEO, go public, and step strategy." So Su Hua became CEO. In 2014, Quai really completed its transition and raised $10 million from Shunwei, DCM, Sequoia, and others. The community started to show signs of life. They even produced their own early influencers. One of the first well-known ones was Ziwang, whose whole style was basically everyday life tips.
How do poor people keep mosquitoes away? Step 1. Close the screen window. That's literally what this screenshot says.
Exactly. That was early Quai's top-tier traffic. Later, Ziwang got big enough to play the female lead in Zhou Keshue's ambiguous music video. If you open Quai from that stage, it doesn't feel like the Quai people remember now. It was much more urban, much more lifestyle-oriented, Honestly, parts of it even felt a little like early Douyin. The thing that truly pushed it into the mainstream, though, came from the northeastern Laotie crowd. In 2014, after dropping out of middle school, Li Tianyou from Jinzhou, Liaoning, uploaded his shouted mic performance online. Women, listen up! He first blew up through the PC live streaming boom, mainly on YY. YY saw him, realized people loved him, and pushed him into first place for Best Male MC. In that scene, those shouting performers were generally called MCs.
That era's MC Tianyou.
Right. YY was a live stream platform. So once Tianyou had all those live moments, they needed somewhere for the clips to settle afterward. That place was Kwai. His Kwai account quickly gained more than 400,000 followers. A lot of people today know him for 一人我赢就醉, but his earliest breakout wasn't even that. It was the Women Listen Up piece. And really, that early stuff wasn't as rhythmic as people now imagine. It was closer to dramatic recitation. See, early hamai or shouting rap was almost like spoken word performance or recited lines. You perform something emotionally heightened, something meant to hit people in the gut.
I never really thought about it that way. After Tianyou got banned, the whole shouting rap form kind of disappeared. Only in the past couple of years, with Lan Lao, has something vaguely similar come back.
Yeah, that comparison kind of works. However, Lan Lao is more rhythmic.
More like a non-musical form of music being accepted again.
Anyway, at that point, YY live streams and Kwai clips didn't really conflict. It was a win-win situation. Users watched the live stream, then wanted clips. They watched the clips, then wanted the live stream. The platforms didn't yet think in today's I must eat your entire market way. Kwai, because of that traffic, shifted very quickly from an urban, lifestyle-ish atmosphere into a true Laotie, lower-tier city vibe. In just 4 months, from August to December 2014, daily active users jumped from 500,000 to 10 million. That wasn't exactly a strategic choice. Wealth just fell into its lap. Once it did, Kwai made the turn. Fine, if Laotie it is, then Laotie it is. Back in the GIF era, Kwai had maybe a few million cumulative users. By the end of 2016, it was at 400 million users. It also wasn't actually China's first short video app. In 2015, Kwai still wasn't number one. Number one was Meipai from Meitu. That made total sense. Meitu was built around beautifying photos, so short video was a natural extension. In just 9 months, Meipai accumulated 100 million users, and for a while, it was considered the king of short video.
Even back then, that was insanely fast.
Along with Weibo's Miaopai, it was basically Meipai and Miaopai battling it out until Kwai beat them. And at this stage, Zhang Yiming had even talked to Kwai about an acquisition. He and Su Hua already knew each other. In 2014, he basically said, "Why not just let us buy you?" If that deal had happened, the shape of short video today would be completely different. Why didn't it happen? Su Hua still wanted to make it big himself. If the price had been extraordinary, maybe he would have sold. But ByteDance in 2014 didn't have that kind of money. Toutiao wasn't yet printing cash the way it later did. By 2016, maybe the situation would have been different. But by then, Kwai had already taken off. The timing never lined up. At that stage, once Laotie culture took over Kwai, spectacle and curiosity became central. Mukbang, but not normal mukbang. It was exaggerated, grotesque, extreme. Self-abuse, busking, all of that flooded in. In 2016, that hugely influential article appeared. Cruel Stories from the Bottom of Society, a video apps rule China. For a lot of urban users, that was the first time they realized not just that Kwai existed, but that it was already the top video app in China.
That article was famous back then.
Yup, Kwai absolutely crushed second-tier products like Meipai and Xiaoying. In 2015, Kwai was the 4th biggest app in China by traffic, behind only WeChat, QQ, and Weibo, becoming one of the 4 heavenly kings. And that was when people first realized that once smartphones spread widely, the internet wouldn't just be controlled by elite culture anymore. There would be a completely different mass-market form of internet product. But the controversy was huge. If you opened the homepage, it was full of self-abuse, vulgarity, Content so extreme it made people physically uncomfortable. There was an auntie in Hebei eating bizarre objects on camera. Light bulbs, worms, glass. A guy in Shandong ate dead pig meat raw, snakes raw, maggots raw. Not even a healthy pig, a pig that had died of illness. The logic was just, let's go more extreme because extremity gets traffic.
Make yourself ugly, abnormal, whatever works. 你千灯百八.
Exactly. Oh, and if you look at those old homepages now, the whole thing just feels bleak. Yet the reason those people did it was that many of them were in rural areas and didn't see other ways to get traffic. They couldn't come up with urban life hacks like how poor people stop mosquitoes. It doesn't make the behavior ethical, but the platform wasn't explicitly encouraging it either. It just wasn't stopping it. And once traffic naturally rewards the most extreme stuff, a vicious cycle begins. Some of that content was genuinely disturbing. On early short video platforms, you could see very young kids smoking and drinking. There were children acting like adults on camera, sitting back like little bosses, smoking, drinking, and saying nonsense for attention. You also saw kids doing inappropriate jokes with their parents, minors showing off relationships, and some girls who were pregnant at 15 displaying it for views. It was deeply uncomfortable.
Then the question becomes, what was the driving force? One possibility is that these were corners of life most people never saw, and the exposure could ultimately push for correction. Another is that the attention itself pushed more people, who otherwise wouldn't have lived that way, to move in that direction for traffic.
Right. After the article drew wider attention, many of those curiosity-based videos were banned. Some creators even went to Kwai headquarters to protest. A lot of the Hebei aunties went in person because Hebei is close to Beijing. They could just take a train there. Some of them waited outside for the company leaders to come out. But when the actual leaders walked by, the aunties did not recognize them. Su Hua and Cheng Yixiao passed by several times, and the aunties had no idea. In their minds, a company leader should be wearing a suit with people surrounding him. Internet company bosses are apparently hard to identify. Inside Kwai, they also did their own analysis. They described the user base as
Kwai,
3
they
lows
also did their
and
own
3
analysis.
baos. They described
Low
the user
education,
base as low
3
age
lows and 3
low
baos.
income.
The
Low
3
education,
baos,
low
cleaners,
age, security
low
guards,
income.
and nannies. They weren't saying that to
Cleaners,
insult
security
anyone.
guards,
They were
and
trying to
nannies.
understand the reality
They weren't
on the
saying
platform.
that to insult
Think
anyone.
about whether there
They
was
were
a
trying to
healthier way
understand
to
the
guide
reality
it,
on the platform
and ask whether they
and
could
think
do
about
something
whether there
different
was a
on top
healthier
of it.
way to guide it.
In the second
whether
half
they
of
could do something
2016,
different on top of
as
it.
the controversy
In the second
grew,
half of
Zheng
2016,
Guangming, a former deputy editor-in-chief at NetEase, and a very
former
senior
deputy
media
editor-in-chief at
joined
NetEase,
Kwai
a
as
very
CMO.
senior media figure,
The idea was
joined
obvious.
Kwai as
They
CMO.
needed to level up the
The
content.
idea was obviously
Zheng
they
had
should
real
level up the
status in media
content.
circles. Zheng had
Zhou
a real
Wei
status
had been
in
his
media
protege.
circles.
Zhou Wei
After he
had been his
joined,
protege.
Kwai changed its
After he
slogan
joined,
to
Kwai
"Record the
changed
world,
his slogan
record
to
you."
"Record the
Bought
world,
naming rights for
record
variety
you."
shows,
Bought
and
naming
ran
rights
all
for variety
kinds of brand
shows,
campaigns.
did all kinds of brand
the
campaigns.
whole thing fell split in half. You'd see a beautifully shot ad, then open Kwai, and it was like the ad told you you'd be drinking milk, while the product handed you green tea. The sensory gap was enormous. Then came another big incident that a lot of people probably still remember. In July 2017, the official Kwai account answered a Zhihu question: why do people dislike Kwai? The official response basically said, people look at the neon-haired shamat rural teenagers and feel repelled by the cheap clothes, exaggerated gestures, wild hairstyles. But if you grew up in a six-tier rural town, what would your taste look like? That kid walked from his village to the most bustling street in the town, went into what he thought was the fanciest salon, and chose what he thought was the coolest look. You may think it's low class, but he's still pursuing the most beautiful thing he can imagine in his life. I won't ignore a young person pursuing what he believes is beautiful. They have hope. They have a future.
For Kwai, that was already a pretty serious effort.
It was trying to explain itself. The problem was that a Zhihu influencer, Li Dang, fired back immediately, and his reply got even more support. He basically said, look, you can do PR if you want, but why are you playing the feel sorry for rural people card? I'm from a northern village myself. Did rural people eat your family's rice? Why are you smearing them like this? Are rural people really stuffing half-meter-long intestines into their mouths like noodles, gnawing whole pig heads, gulping down buckets of soy sauce? His point wasn't totally unreasonable either.
The two sides weren't even debating the same thing. They were each pushing in their own direction and gathering their own agreement.
Right. Things might have ended there, but then a Kwai staffer directly messaged Li Dang and insulted him in a very ugly way. Not just, hey, we noticed you watch lots of pretty girls on Kwai too. More like, we inside Kwai have seen what you browse. You're not exactly innocent. They even mocked him about finding a partner on Weibo. That was awful. Li Dang made the DM public, and the whole thing exploded. Kwai got flamed into apologizing. Later media analysis suggested that both the original Kuaizhi Hu answer and even the insulting DM may have been personally written by Zeng Guangming, their new CMO. That wasn't absolutely proven, but it was the dominant media reading. In April 2018, Zeng left the company.
He even wrote the insulting DM.
That's what many people believed, and honestly, that whole situation showed Kuai's painful double-edged sword. Those shouting rap big brothers and livestream big brothers brought enormous traffic. If you got rid of them, your numbers dropped immediately. But if you kept them, the platform's public image would be ugly. So before 2017, Kwai was the unquestioned king of Chinese short video. In June 2016, at the famous office tower in Wudaokou, one of the giant building logos changed, from NetEase to Kwai. People saw that and said, yup, the new king has arrived. NetEase belongs to the previous era now. And at the end of 2016, when Kwai was at one of its high-growth peaks, the company actually did an internal analysis of a new short video product called Douyin. Their conclusion?
It's no threat.
Basically, not important. More than that, they concluded Douyin was actually helpful to Kwai. Not sure how they came to the conclusion.
It might pull more people into short video form content?
Yes, they conducted data analysis, which concluded kind of what you said. It might just pull more people into the short video pool in general. Some of their data seem to show that when Kwai users also installed Douyin, their interactions and content production on Kwai actually increased. So Kwai thought, fine, let them install it. Maybe Douyin is just a tool. They didn't realize it was the real enemy. According to one former Kwai employee, nicknamed Judge, Kwai's atmosphere back then was really different from ByteDance's. Kwai had become somewhat arrogant after eating that massive wave of traffic. Product experience often lagged. They still didn't even have a company-wide visualized data platform in the first half of 2017. Think about that. By then, they were already a giant internet company with a huge logo on a building, and if you were a product manager or operator who wanted to see company data, you had to write your own SQL and pull it from the database manually. That's rough.
Very rough.
It showed they didn't really prioritize that side. Even company-level A/B testing didn't formally roll out until 2018. Earlier, engineers basically hacked things together on their own. And some of Kwai's later strategic misses weren't about being slow in a purely operational sense. They were about belief. Cheng Yixiao believed users themselves should hold more control over what they saw, and the traffic the average creator had matters. So the algorithm played a much smaller role than at ByteDance. That meant a heavier editorial role and a continued insistence on the two-column waterfall layout. Why keep two columns? Because it preserved user choice. I see the cover image, I decide whether to click. Douyin and Musical.ly, by contrast, move toward full-screen single-column forcing. You don't choose much, you just get fed. In the end, human nature turns out to be lazier and more receptive to strong recommendation, so Kwai's older form was always going to be at a disadvantage. There was another product choice too. Kwai optimized hard around low data costs because Laotie users needed cheap bandwidth. So rather than investing as aggressively in recommendation technology, they invested a lot in video compression. Their videos consumed less data.
That mattered more back then.
A lot more. And then there was the broader organizational culture. ByteDance was completely data-driven. Users say this, users do that, the numbers show X, so we change it. Kwai was different. Judge said early Kwai stuck with a 7-second video length simply because Cheng Yixiao liked the number 7, supposedly because fish only remember for 7 seconds.
Could just be rumors, but if true, there's not much rationale, just that's the decision, yep.
Right, it shows a lack of strict data logic. The organization also expanded slowly. In early 2017, despite being this huge short video platform, the whole company only had around 100 people. Slow hiring, weak early talent accumulation, not much talent hired. And slow also meant not very overworked. That was part of the arrogance too. Zhang Yiming's style was the opposite. He pushed himself and everybody else like crazy. Toutiao was already hugely profitable, and he still slept little, watched every business line, drove constant overtime. Kwai, by contrast, after reaching a peak in late 2016 and early 2017, suddenly announced a more humane work schedule. 9:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., 5 days a week, no unnecessary overtime. That happened basically when the war was just beginning. Douyin had launched in 2016. Imagine the first gunshot of the war, and your response is, let's all rest more, let's reduce combat strength. From the worker's point of view, that's wonderful. From the competitive point of view, it's dangerous.
Like the earlier story about Baidu Waimai sending employees on holiday during a battle.
Exactly. And Su Hua himself was constantly described as Buddha-like, laid back, detached. Some people say it wasn't that he wanted to be laid back, it was that he simply couldn't become aggressive even when he tried. He wasn't built that way. So if anyone was going to go aggressive, it was always going to be ByteDance. Which brings us into part 3, the Silver Age. By around 2016, video was spreading everywhere inside mobile internet products. 内涵段子, Toutiao, video was already taking over those ecosystems too. We mentioned last episode that average daily time spent online had reached 76 minutes, and most of that came from video. Within ByteDance's own products, short video traffic was growing something like 35% a month in the first half of the year. So sooner or later, they had to make a move. And honestly, ByteDance moved very late. Miaopai came in 2012, Xiaoying and Weishi were already there in 2013, Meipai arrived in 2014, Kwai had transformed in 2013. In 2015, you had Xiaokaxiu, Kanyan, and a bunch of other short video apps. By 2016, the general view in the market was that at least the first major wave of the battle was basically over. Kwai had already taken the throne. But once ByteDance did move, you immediately saw what kind of company it was. Their method? Straight up homage. They launched 3 products, Xigua Video to go after YouTube and Bilibili, Huoshan to go after Kwai, and one more to go after the hottest short video product in Europe and America at the time, Musical.ly. That product was first called Awesome Me, hardly anybody used it, and ByteDance itself didn't care that much. One reason was that Huoshan was going well, the Kwai style direction looked stronger, and Musical.ly itself hadn't succeeded in China, so on paper, Awesome Me didn't seem that promising. This is where Zhangnan comes in. We mentioned before that ByteDance acquired the image sharing community Tuba in 2013, and Zhangnan began assembling the team. The team was tiny. She brought in a product lead named Ren Lifeng, nicknamed Zhuan Zhuan, who many people later regarded as one of the core heroes behind Douyin's product success. He came out of Baidu Tieba, another member of that Huangpu Military Academy lineage, professionally trained. I actually share a lot of mutual friends with Zhuan Zhuan, and everybody speaks very highly of him.
Why?
Because all the people with actual short video experience have been subbed over to Huoshan. If you'd done any video work at all, you were supporting that project. So the Douyin team had maybe 10 people total. We mentioned last episode how understaffed it was. How do you keep morale up in a situation like that? You basically pamper people. Someone has a birthday, you film a video for them, eat with them, drink with them. There was even a blogger from Canada, Xue Laoshi, who had criticized them hard and given them a pile of suggestions. Later, the team invited him to a party and even made him a plaque that said, "Godfather of Chinese music short video." They gave out emotional value by the truckload. They also finally changed the name to the far more memorable Douyin. The positioning matched Musical.ly, a music short video social platform. Then they started pulling users from other short video platforms because that's where the densest, most relevant creators already were. One tactic was the watermark. If you made a video in Douyin and uploaded it somewhere else, it carried a Douyin watermark. People would see it and think, okay, maybe I should try that app. But the controversy
so that was the
huge.
logic.
You're sneaking
If you
into
open
my
the
house,
homepage,
it was
it
full of
blocked them.
self-abuse. So the early Douyin team had to get
so
creative.
extreme, it made
What
people
kind of
physically
wild growth
uncomfortable.
could they use instead? There was an auntie
How
in Hebei
wild are we
eating
talking?
bizarre objects on
Brute
camera.
force wild.
Light bulbs, worms,
Pay creators
glass.
to plaster Douyin
A guy in
stickers all
Shandong
over
ate
themselves.
dead pig meat raw.
Literally put the Douyin
Snakes
logo
raw.
on your body.
Maggots
Then go
raw.
live stream or make
Not
content
even a
somewhere
healthy
else.
pig.
Harder
A pig
for
that had
Kwai to
died of
detect
illness.
this.
Block. The
My
logic was
God.
just, let's
The
go
cold
more
start
extreme
was
because
unbelievably
extremity
slow.
gets traffic. By late 2016 and early 2017, even Zhang Yiming had basically stopped attending Douyin's bi-monthly meetings. Earlier, he'd paid close attention. Then, he stopped showing up. It was almost like, you guys just play with it yourselves. The first slight breakout came in 2017, and it was thanks to Yue Yunpeng, a household name and celebrity. In March 2017, Yue Yunpeng reposted a Douyin creator's imitation video of him on Weibo. That was just his own spontaneous repost. He saw it, liked it, shared it. The thing exploded. 80,000 likes, over 5,000 reposts. The imitation was so good that even I kind of remember it. You could see the Douyin watermark on it. And the Douyin's official site immediately recognized the opening and amplified it. Downloads surged. The imitator's own account took off too. That's classic ByteDance. Once they see the first sweet taste, they move. So, next step, invite celebrities. Since Douyin had been positioned from the start around music and entertainment, you can see why its early style was so different from Kuai's Laotie culture. They invited Hu Yanbin, Lu Han, Li Yifeng, Du Haitao, Yang Di, and a bunch of other celebrities. Their phrase was that Douyin's early users were a group with sexual attractiveness, not in the sense of explicit edge content, but in the sense that they were young, energetic, visually attractive, male and female alike. Those early users brought in more users because people enjoy watching that. Later internally, they admitted that there was some accidental luck in that too. They hadn't originally said, we must attract exactly these kinds of people. They started from music. It just so happened that music brought in this young, vibrant crowd, and that crowd then opened up other kinds of content. Ironically, the fact that Douyin was slower also helped it. Its cold start ended up being healthier than Huoshan's. Huoshan's early strategy was basically copy Kuai content, poach creators, imitate Kuai styles, import Kuai's ecosystem by force. But Kuai's ecosystem had taken years to form. You can't just transplant the creators and magically produce the same atmosphere. Douyin creators, by contrast, grew as Douyin creators. Users had emotional attachment to Douyin itself. It's the same reason later attempts like Wukong Q&A versus Zhihu or Xigua versus Bilibili always felt off. You can poach Bilibili creators, sure, but you can't poach their bullet comment culture. You can't poach the user community and vibe. That's why nobody ever felt those products had truly good tone. So Douyin's painful early cold start was actually a hidden advantage.
If
Then
you open
2017
Kuai
came,
from that stage,
ByteDance raised
it doesn't
$2
feel like
billion.
the Kuai people remember
And suddenly,
now.
the company
It
had
was
all
much
the
more
ammunition
urban,
in the world, much more lifestyle. Douyin's growth looked promising. Honestly, the budget got bigger,
parts of it even
and then
felt a little like
cannons
early
fire.
Douyin.
Gold pours in. In May 2017, Douyin reached the million-level DAU tier, and Zhang Yiming began full-spectrum burn money mode on Douyin. By October 2017, DAU hit 14 million. 2 months later, thanks to more spending, it hit 30 million. What made that terrifying was that the 30-day retention didn't fall as DAU surged, it rose. It had originally been around 8%, which is the kind of number that makes you think the product is dead and all your ad money is being set on fire. Then it climbed to over 20%. Usage time also rose to 40 minutes
why
a day.
products like
More
Xigua
than
Video
doubled.
and Wukong
And
Q&A
behind that wasn't
never
just
really
external
reached the
marketing.
same level. Internally,
Xigua once
Douyin's
had more than
technology was
50
improving
million
at
DAU,
incredible speed.
and ByteDance
The main
loudly
technical
announced
leader
huge
brought in
budgets
for the
to poach
Legion
creators.
was Zhu Wenjia.
Medium and
Where was he
long-form
from?
video never
Of
fully
course,
fit the
Baidu.
flywheel.
Everybody
Xigua
important
content
on the
later
technical
got
side
repackaged
came
again
out of
under
Baidu.
Douyin Selected,
He had been a chief
which
architect
itself
for
hints at
Baidu
ByteDance's
Search
broader
and was
logic
already
now.
considered the
If
number
Douyin
3
is a black
algorithm
hole
leader
for traffic,
inside ByteDance
then maybe
when he joined
longer
Douyin.
content can simply
After
be
Douyin
attached to that
succeeded,
black
he
hole
effectively became
rather than
one of
forced to live
ByteDance's core
independently.
technical bosses.
Wukong Q&A
And today,
was
a
similar.
lot of ByteDance's
It
AI
launched in
side
2017
still sits
with
under
lots
him.
of noise and money spent poaching Jihu heavyweights. But its user profile skewed older, more male, more lower tier, more entertainment seeking. It simply didn't align with Jihu's core content culture, and ByteDance's growth engines were a poorer fit.
Oh,
Another important figure was Zhang Hongjiang. He had been one of the big bosses at Microsoft Research Asia, also an old superior of Zhang Yiming's in his Microsoft days. At the same time, he was one of Zhang Yiming's investors through Source Code Capital and later became a partner in ByteDance. He had also been CEO of Kingsoft, so he was a giant in both technical and business circles. Zhang Hongjiang then brought in another major AI expert, Ma Weiying, who helped on the recommendation and overall algorithm architecture side. That pushed Douyin's recommendation system beyond rival short video products and gave it an actual moat. Recommendation quality improved massively, and that improvement clearly fed into the jump in 30-day retention and daily usage time. There was also an outside factor many people don't notice, the rise of Oppo and Vivo in 2017. Pre-installs mattered, yes, but more importantly, the user base matched perfectly. Once all those Oppo and Vivo phones spread through the market for lower-income consumers, a lot of those users opened their phones and thought, sure, I'll install WeChat. Then what? A lot of them didn't care about Weibo. So what entertainment app do I install? Kuai. Douyin. The match was completely natural.
that's what you mean.
Exactly. At the time, huge chunks of mobile time were being spent on Kuai and Douyin. Today, your phone comes full of possibilities. Back then it was, I installed WeChat, added a few people. What else am I even doing? Kuai and Douyin were obvious answers. Then, during Chinese New Year 2018, Douyin pulled in a dozen-plus celebrities: He Jiong, Jackson Wang, Deng Lun, Zhou Dongyu, Guan Xiaotong, Huang Xiaomin, Angelababy, Chen He, Chris Lee, Dioraba, and so on, to do timed New Year greetings and red envelope events. At that point, the spending really was, once the cannons fire, gold pours in. Douyin was spending over 4 million RMB a day in marketing.
4 million a day.
And the result was immediate. It had been a little over 30 million DAU. After the holiday, it was 70 million.
From a single spring festival.
A single spring festival. Then the question became, what now? What now? Keep spending, obviously. 4 million a day? That's not enough. Raise budget to 20 million a day. In April, Douyin broke 100 million DAU. That made it the third mountain of mobile internet. At that point, the giants of everyday use were basically WeChat, Weibo, and Douyin. Even QQ, a popular web communication app, wasn't that high. Toutiao, the news app, wasn't that high. Meipai had already been punched once by Kuai and then got punched again by Douyin. It was practically gone.
And the key, like you said last episode, is that the money actually worked and the user stayed.
Exactly. That's why people say Douyin's rise wasn't random. Zhang Yiming spent more than anyone else, and he was willing to poach the very best people at extreme prices. At the time, it felt expensive. Later, it looked cheap. By the time Douyin passed 100 million DAU, Huoshan and Xigua, previously the internal priorities, had to move aside. Douyin was now the core. The first huge cultural phenomenon on Douyin was Sili Sili. Do you still remember it?
Barely.
The song was insanely catchy, but the key was the dance. Everybody learned the dance. That turned it into another viral participation format. The original track came from a Romanian reggae singer named Mateo. After it went viral in China, Mateo heard about it, possibly with a Chinese team pushing the opportunity, and rushed over to tour China while the virality was still there. He gets off the plane and sees fans dancing Seli Seli in front of him. He's completely confused because that dance had nothing to do with his actual MV. It was a wholly Chinese-made dance attached to a song.
And once you hear the clip, you realize the song wasn't even called Suli Suli. It was Panama. By 2018, Douyin's position was already incredibly hard to shake. That year, there was another symbolic event people love mentioning. The giant Toutiao sign on the building came down, and the ByteDance sign replaced it. That's when people really began replacing Toutiao with ByteDance in the famous TMD, Toutiao Meituan Didi Trio. The corporate name finally became widely known, and the sign change signaled something very real. Toutiao was no longer the core business.
The corporate name finally became widely known, and the sign change signaled something very real. Toutiao was no longer the core business. In 2018, ByteDance became the most valuable unicorn in the world, not just in China, in the world, surpassing Uber. Since then, for almost 8 years, in China, only Ant has briefly overtaken it. Overseas, SpaceX and OpenAI have since surpassed ByteDance at different points, but the point remains, ByteDance has been very hard to shake.
And nowadays, even many of ByteDance's legal entities and internal naming systems are shifting toward Douyin Group.
That tells you what the true crown jewel is. If you look at Douyin's average monthly DAU trend from 2016 to 2020, the period of fastest growth, the truly insane thing is that they never eased off while it was climbing. At every stage, even when growth was already explosive, they kept spending aggressively. The line goes from around 400,000 up to over 300 million, and the slope barely softens.
This is when people started looking back at that famous 2016 Wu Zhen photo of TND, Wang Xing, Zhang Yiming, Cheng Wei, laughing together while media wrote, are these three plotting how to destroy BAT, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent? At the time, from the perspective of valuation growth, the threat looked real. But by 2018, only ByteDance had truly done it. So why did Douyin succeed? In many ways, it was the same mode as Toutiao News: timing, terrain, people. Timing meant 4G had spread, networks were stable, fast, and cheap. Large, high-resolution smartphones had become affordable. Watching video on mobile was no longer miserable. Terrain meant Musical.ly had made a major strategic mistake by thinking of itself primarily as a social network rather than a content platform. Musical.ly focused on people you followed. Douyin focused on content. Douyin wanted to be a TV station on your phone. On the supply side, both Douyin and Kuai benefited from the same era shift. Mobile internet expanded beyond the old inside the fifth ring road urban elite. Third and fourth tier city users became creators. That's the majority of China. Then there was the human factor, Douyin's own team. Behind it stood Toutiao's already mature recommendation systems, commercialization, and technical systems. Kuai, even as a large company, still had to build a lot of things from scratch. Douyin didn't. It reused what Toutiao had already polished. The organization was also ferociously data-driven, because Zhang Yiming worshipped experimentation. Compare that with a product like Xiaokaxiu. Xiaokaxiu had been very hot. When lip-sync segments appeared on shows like Happy Camp, Xiaokaxiu benefited. But its transition failed. It later launched a Douyin competitor called Huangka, You Shake, I Sway, and it sank without a trace. ByteDance's recommendation algorithm really was terrifyingly strong. With Xiaokaxiu, users kept opening the app and seeing homogenized content, the same movie clips, the same bits, over and over. Douyin didn't get stuck that way, so timing, terrain, and people all came together. And Douyin also pivoted extremely fast, from music app to we're going all in on building the biggest short video platform possible. Once they discovered that young people liked it, and maybe older people liked it too, they adjusted and poured more resources in. That's why Douyin beat Huoshan. It became the chosen focus. Of course, Douyin still had very strong enemies. The biggest was Tencent. Tencent and ByteDance had already been rivals for a long time. In the information era, Toutiao had battled Tencent News and won. Tencent then built a recommendation-based app, Tiantian Kuaibao, directly aimed at Toutiao. They even held mobilization rallies about killing Toutiao. From the perspective of that time, ByteDance looked very vulnerable. That's also why Zhang Yiming had struggled so much to raise money for ByteDance early on. Tencent and ByteDance had already been rivals for a long time. In the information era, Toutiao had battled Tencent News and won. Tencent then built a recommendation-based app, Tiantian Kuaibao, directly aimed at Toutiao. They even held mobilization rallies about killing Toutiao. From the perspective of that time, ByteDance looked very vulnerable. That's also why Zhang Yiming has struggled so much to raise money for ByteDance early on. ByteDance was just a small fry. Tencent was worth more than $500 billion. If Tencent stepped on you, it was like a giant stepping on an ant. But Tiantian Kuaibao never had the same fighting energy as Toutiao. First, the team just wasn't as intense, as wolfish, as fanatical. ByteDance set goals like 150 million DAU. Tencent side, by contrast, set a year-end target of 32.5 million. Not 35 million because they discussed it and decided 35 was unrealistic. That tells you everything about the difference in temperament.
It's hard to judge after the fact because now we know the results.
And now on short video, Tencent had entered much earlier than ByteDance with Weishi. It had launched in September 2013. This was the original Weishi 1.0, not the version most people later remember.
Wow, 2013? I remember when you talked about Tencent having dozens of video apps, but I hadn't realized this one started that early.
It was very early, and at its peak, its DAU reportedly hit 40 million. Alongside Meipai, it was called one of China's two short video heroes. At one point, Weishi's downloads even surpassed WeChat's.
Though of course what short video meant then was still very different.
Totally. But if we compare Tencent's approach with ByteDance's, the first difference is obvious. Once ByteDance saw an opportunity, it went all in. Tencent didn't. Even when something was labeled strategic, Tencent had too many strategic products at once. It was never going to dump the entire group's resources into one thing the way ByteDance would. Second, Tencent misread the opportunity. Once Kuai rose, Tencent basically gave up. From the point of view of the time, that wasn't irrational. Almost everybody thought Kuai had already won. ByteDance was the weird one for refusing to quit.
Public opinion probably reached a consensus by then.
Then, in 2017, Tencent invested $350 million in Kuai. That's classic Tencent style. If I can't beat you, I'll become your shareholder. Then it shut Weishi down. But in 2018, Douyin exploded, and Tencent suddenly realized, wait, there's still a fight here, and this one is a real enemy camp. Kuai I don't have to fear, I'm a shareholder. Douyin is different. In May 2018, another hot event happened. First came Pan Luan's famous essay, Tencent Has No Dreams, and Ponyma personally responded to that. Zhang Yiming then reposted another article, Who Says Tencent Has No Dreams? He was actually quite generous in tone, repeating that line about Tencent being an exceptional company, and Ponyma being the CEO he admired most. This wasn't just surface politeness. Long before that, Zhang Yiming had publicly said that what made Tencent great was that a boss worth tens of billions still didn't grandstand, didn't go climbing mountains for PR, didn't pick public fights, didn't chase interviews or magazine covers, but instead tested products like a frontline worker and kept improving them endlessly. That had been his famous evaluation years earlier, when ByteDance was still tiny and Zhang Yiming would go across to Tencent's offices to give talks. Back then, it was a big brother-little brother dynamic. He probably didn't expect that one day he'd be sitting at Ponyma's level. And then, just days after reposting that pro-Tencent article, Douyin's promotional materials for collaborations with 7 museums got blocked on WeChat Moments. Douyin publicly said WeChat was blocking them. Then, the quarrels escalated. Zhang Yiming posted a Moments update celebrating TikTok reaching #1 in the global app store, which on its own had nothing to do with Ponyma. But in the comments under his own post, he added, WeChat's blocking and Weishi's copying still can't stop Douyin. Ponyma saw that in Zhang Yiming's Moments and replied directly. That could be understood as defamation. Oof. Yeah, the temper clearly came out. Zhang replied that the former issue, meaning WeChat's blocking,
wasn't suitable for public discussion, but the latter issue, Weishi's copying, was something they had been notarizing. He added, "I didn't mean to start a war of words, I just couldn't hold back for a second. Our PR team already criticized me. I'll send you the material separately." Which is basically, there's more dirt here than you know. Pony Ma then shot back, "We have plenty to notarize on your side too." That screenshot became legendary. At first, people couldn't believe two tech tycoons were actually arguing like that in Moment's comments, but it turned out to be real. You could even see other industry big names like Zhu Xiaohu and Bao Fan watching from the sidelines and liking comments.
Everybody was in there.
From then on, the state of war became real. Douyin links were almost wiped out inside WeChat. Even simple short links often couldn't be sent, much less opened. Years later, ByteDance even published a blue book documenting all the times Tencent had blocked or restricted it from 2018 to 2021.
Major incidents of Tencent blocking and banning ByteDance.
Exactly. They compiled the receipts. Meanwhile, at the start of 2018, Tencent doubled down. It led a new $1 billion investment in Kuai and rebooted Weishi. So this was Weishi 2.0. It grew to more than 400 people very quickly. Strategically, Tencent was paying attention. And yes, it also declared it would burn money. But here again you see the difference. ByteDance spent with incredible efficiency. Tencent just spent. Tencent announced 3 billion RMB in subsidies, and after grinding away for half a year, Weishi's DAU reached 4 million. Oof, that's all it got. At that point, Douyin's retention was already around 80%. Weishi's was 43%. Users spent only a quarter as much time there. On the surface, it wasn't even that Weishi's feature list was so much worse. In features, everybody looked broadly similar. But product parity doesn't save you when you're late. That's how some former Weishi people describe it too. The issue was simply that Tencent was late. Douyin absolutely had network effects. Not like WeChat's friend graph network effects, but creator ecosystem network effects. Once the creator ecosystem becomes rich, user experience improves. Once user experience improves, more creators come. If Weishi starts trying to do the same thing from zero 2 years later, it no longer matters much, even if the product looks similar. Tencent also launched plenty of other experimental internal racehorses. You Video, Xiafan Video, Maobing, and so on, but there's barely any point naming them. If Weishi, with all of Tencent's group-level support, couldn't catch Douyin, those other products had no chance. Chen Lin, the former Toutiao CEO and one of ByteDance's early core product people, later said Tencent's biggest strategic mistake was shutting Weishi down in the first place. If they had just kept it alive through those years, who knows what might have happened?
At least they would have had a short window for them to turn, adapt, and respond.
Exactly. And if you look at user attention over time, the time ByteDance captured came disproportionately from Tencent, not from Baidu. Early on, people assumed ByteDance as an information company would mostly replace search. But when people later looked at mobile internet usage time, what kept shrinking was Tencent's share. Think about it. Browsing short videos for fun and playing mobile games happen in the same emotional state and the same physical scenarios. When Honor of Kings launches a hot new season, people spend less time on Douyin. When Douyin gets especially hot, people open games less.
Same mood, same moment. Either ByteDance or Tencent.
Right, they solve similar time demand. This is why, as product managers always say, competitors aren't only the obvious same category products. Ride-hailing doesn't only compete with taxis, it also competes with buses and subways because they all serve the same transportation need. Likewise, short video doesn't just compete with other short video, it also eats from gaming, from social, from news consumption. And that leads to Tencent's eventual answer. In the end, Tencent had to rely on WeChat to save its short video future. If Douyin is a giant black hole for attention, WeChat is also a giant black hole for attention. In January 2020, channels began internal testing with Zhang Xiaolong personally leading it. By June, DAU had already passed 200 million. That's the force of WeChat. In early 2023, Pony Ma said channels was the hope of the whole company. By August 2024, WeChat Shop branding and the broader commercialization system made it even clearer that channels was strategically moving down a road not totally unlike Douyin's: ads, commerce, content-led monetization. In short video, Douyin is still number one, but by 2022, just 2 years after launch, channels had already passed Kwai. It now sits at around 600 million plus users and is firmly number 2. So much for Tencent. Let's look back briefly to Kwai, because after Douyin's rise, Kwai did not simply lie down and die, it fought back. They internally launched what was called the K3 campaign. The core idea was daily active users, growth. We fight on the number itself. They reorganized management, centralized more power, and finally started correcting some of the cultural and structural issues that had held them back.
One complaint from Kwai executives at the time was very practical. There were effectively two bosses, Su Hua and Cheng Yixiao, and people had to report upward in both directions. Decision-making was slow. One boss could approve something, and the other could still overrule it. So efficiency suffered.
That would absolutely slow everything down.
Exactly. Over time, Kwai adjusted. By 2020, it had become more centralized, and it no longer stubbornly held on to the old dual-column experience. It began supporting single-column full-screen feeds too, which had already proven to be the dominant format. In 2021, Su Hua stepped down as CEO. By 2023, he was serving as chairman, and Kwai fully entered the era of Cheng Yixiao as the single core leader. In other words, one unquestioned top decision maker. If we review Kwai's growth, it broke 10 million DAU in early 2015, hit 60 million in 2016, crossed 100 million in 2018, and by the time the K3 battle started, it was already around 300 million DAU. Today, it's around 400 million. Taken on its own terms, that's still extremely impressive. The plate is still huge. The problem is just that Douyin did something even more extreme. Kwai went public on February 5, 2021. The stock opened up 193%. Its current market cap is a bit over 360 billion Hong Kong dollars. At its peak though, it was a staggering $1.7 trillion. So today it's roughly 1/5 the peak. That tells you the market doesn't really believe in its long-term ceiling the way it once did. It's still a second-tier Chinese internet giant, below Meituan and NetEase, but still very much a giant. One thing investors are a little more optimistic about now is the AI era. Kling, Kwai's multimodal video generation model, is absolutely in the global top tier. Kling contributed around 300 million RMB in Q3 alone, which is no joke. Also, Kwai's overseas product. Kwai has become a national-level app in Brazil, with more than 60 million active users there, and is still expanding in Indonesia, Pakistan, the Middle East, and North Africa. Their latest Q3 numbers looked decent too. RMB 35.6 billion in revenue, up 14.2% year-over-year. Adjusted net profit rose from 3.9 billion to 5 billion. Sure, compared with the very biggest giants, that's not insane, but 5 billion is still a real number.
It also widens people's perspective. In a brand new frontier market, if everybody rushes in at the same time, there can still be winners and losers.
Exactly, and if you break down Kwai's revenue, advertising is still the biggest piece, even though people always think of it first as a live streaming company. Online marketing brought in over 20 billion RMB, live streaming around 9.6 billion, and other services, mainly e-commerce plus Kling and related AI, about 5.9 billion. So that's Kwai, which brings us to the next chapter. Douyin had already secured its position by 2018 and 2019. The next big frontier was overseas. Before we go there, let's just take one last look at the contrast between Su Hua and Cheng Yixiao.
Why didn't we do that earlier?
Because I like doing it at the end of the chapter. And now we enter part 4, the Golden Age. In the fall of 2014, the first time Zhang Yiming went to the US, he toured Facebook and Twitter. One thing struck him: lots of employees there were using Xiaomi phones.
That gave him enormous confidence that Chinese companies going global was going to become a real thing. After he returned to China, he set a target. Within 3 years, overseas users should account for 50% of the company's user base. That fit perfectly with his early vision for ByteDance. And remember, this was already in 2014.
That's a big swing.
So what was ByteDance's earliest overseas product? The English version of Toutiao, Newsmaster. Later, it was renamed Top Buzz.
That sounds like it would run into all kinds of issues.
It did. In 2015, Zhang Yiming hired Liu Xinhua, the former CMO of Cheetah Mobile, to lead overall internationalization. At the time, if you wanted to build globally, you couldn't avoid learning from or poaching Cheetah Mobile talents because Cheetah was one of the few visible Chinese cases with global traction. The idea sounded good. The reality wasn't. Growth overseas couldn't reuse China-style pre-install logic. Abroad, user acquisition depended overwhelmingly on Google and Facebook. That was the problem.
What do you mean by depended on the giants?
I mean exactly that. In overseas markets, if you want users, you mainly buy ads from Google and Facebook. The distribution channels are already monopolized. In China back then, you could still find weird low-cost pathways, pre-installs, growth hacks, all kinds of scrappy routes. Overseas, the platforms had already locked down the toll booth. So even if you were spending money, huge chunks of that money were just flowing into Google and Facebook's pockets.
So the we know how to spend aggressively advantage couldn't really play out the same way.
Exactly. By the end of 2017, Liu Xinhua left ByteDance, and that experiment was basically over. It had failed. A lot of people don't even know this stage existed. They think ByteDance went global and instantly crushed it. Not true. What's worth noting is that the international business still produced some important people, including Kang Zeyu, Bob, who had previously worked on social products in India. Then came the first real short video product for global expansion, Awesome Me, essentially reusing the very earliest Douyin package. Since the product shell already existed, why not recycle it? Soon enough, they rebranded it as TikTok. The word comes from tick-tock, the ticking sound of a clock. They dropped the C and made it TikTok. Why choose that word? Because, much like Alibaba, it was easy to pronounce across lots of countries and languages. The team has specifically tested for that.
It sounds simple when you explain it.
The very first major market they wanted to crack was actually Japan, something many people wouldn't expect. The reasoning was that if Douyin could work in China, then maybe another East Asian market with a large population and some cultural overlap would make sense as the first stop, rather than jumping straight into the US, where the culture was more unfamiliar. So they opened an office in Shibuya, Tokyo. It was very hard. The biggest problem was that Japanese culture turned out to be even more conservative than Chinese culture in this context. Ordinary users didn't really want to appear on camera. They weren't that eager to clown around or show themselves off.
Honestly, I wouldn't have instinctively thought Chinese and Japanese user expression styles were that similar either.
Right. What they really meant was maybe some overlap in broader East Asian expression patterns. But in practice, they found Japanese users had a particularly strong desire for filters, editing tools, and special effects. That probably also had something to do with East Asian appearance anxiety. People were less comfortable showing bare faces. More effects meant more willingness to create. As TikTok developed, Zhang Yiming articulated the strategy very clearly. Globalize the product, localize the content. The product layer, UI, interaction logic, overall structure would be universal, but the actual recommendation pools, marketing, and monetization would be localized market by market. Content wasn't fully walled off by country, but what got promoted and highlighted would depend on local user tastes. One reason this worked surprisingly well is that their premium short video content pool was reusable across countries. This is unlike ride-hailing or food delivery, where every new country means driver networks, logistics, government relations, all the messy local stuff. With TikTok, they could launch the new market by seeding it with universally appealing material from existing markets: cats, dogs, attractive people dancing, people doing tricks. A lot of that stuff is basically cross-race and cross-language. Some content just works everywhere. so that starter library could be reused over and over without much risk. That was the key advantage. Even so, at that stage, TikTok was still just doing some experiments. It wasn't a world-beating product yet. It was nowhere near that. The real milestone came next. In February 2017, ByteDance first acquired Flipagram, a well-known short video creation tool. Then it turned toward a much bigger target, Musical.ly. We'd already talked about how Musical.ly had done very well after raising money. By May 2017, it had crossed 200 million registered users globally, was nearing 100 million monthly active users, and had already hit 40 million DAU by the end of 2016. About 60% of users were aged 13 to 20, so what was Musical.ly's biggest problem? Money. They were running out of it. The simplest way to put it, the flowers in the winter greenhouse were gone.
Meaning the money was gone. Nice metaphor.
Their monetization was nowhere near as smooth as Douyin's. ByteDance could port over all kinds of advertising logic, sales teams, pricing systems. Douyin was already becoming a money-printing machine. Musical.ly wasn't. Its main revenue source was basically live stream tipping.
Pure show platform mode.
Exactly. The problem was that tipping alone couldn't carry the business. The really important business, advertising, they had almost no idea how to run. Their feed ads were sold at very high, fixed prices without any mature auction system. A single ad might be priced at $75,000, sometimes $300,000, and certain packages went for $2.5 million. It was all basically priced for show. There was no proven case base. Buyers didn't really want it. That's also why Zhang Yiming once said that, in the whole ByteDance empire, only he and Zhang Lidong were truly irreplaceable. Zhang Lidong was the one who turned it into a mint. In the US, one journalist surveyed 9 ad agencies and found that 6 didn't even know Musical.ly accepted advertising at all.
Which means they hadn't found the right people to do the business side.
Exactly. By the time Musical.ly was close to running out of cash, ByteDance's annual revenue had already passed 100 billion RMB, and Douyin alone accounted for around 60% of revenue. The scale difference was absurd. Douyin had feed ads everywhere, splash screen ads, event sponsorships, creator ad systems like Xingtu, livestream gifts, later e-commerce, verified brand accounts, video boosting. You made the content, wanted it to go viral, and ByteDance could charge both sides. It squeezed water out of every sponge imaginable. They monetized traffic from any and every angle.
Hydropower generation.
Exactly. The traffic flowed by, and they generated power from every drop. No waste. By 2018 to 2020, ByteDance was directly eating into almost every bucket of advertising revenue in China outside of e-commerce. The whole market was a giant pie, and ByteDance kept slices from everybody else. Baidu, Tencent, everybody. So when Musical.ly began looking at the giants as potential buyers, the first company they approached was Facebook. That made intuitive sense. Facebook was strategically aligned and obviously needed something like it. Zuckerberg met Zhu Jun and the team several times. But Zuckerberg hesitated. On the one hand, it was a Chinese company. On the other hand, the user base was so young that Facebook wasn't fully convinced the demand was durable. The biggest blocker, though, was something we foreshadowed earlier. Who had veto power? Fu Sheng. Fu Sheng, as the major early investor, had veto rights and didn't want Facebook to buy it. Domestically, 2 other buyers also surfaced, Douyin and Kuai. Kuai's plan was to buy around 40% and leave Musical.ly relatively independent, more like a merge partnership than a full takeover. But cash-wise, Kuai didn't have the same firepower as ByteDance, and Fu Sheng's conditions were harsh enough that Tsuhua eventually didn't agree.
Forced bundling.
Exactly. The products were News Republic and the Live.me. One was news, one was live streaming. Neither was dead, but neither was very exciting. Fu Sheng just knew he had leverage. According to later reporting, Zhang Yiming eventually stopped really negotiating with Zhu Jun and Yang Luyu, and instead spent most of the serious back and forth talking with Fu Sheng in cafes. In the end, Zhang Yiming agreed.
ByteDance paid $86.6 million for News Republic, invested another $50 million into Live.me, and then spent roughly $800 million to buy Musical.ly. So it basically overpaid by around $150 million because of the bundle deal.
Yeah.
Today, that extra $150 million looks laughably worth it. In September 2017, ByteDance raised another round and had plenty of ammunition. Then, on August 2, 2018, Musical.ly and TikTok were merged. All accounts and content were moved into TikTok. From the raw data, you could argue ByteDance didn't even have to buy Musical.ly. TikTok's total monthly users had already been pushed up to around 500 million, while Musical.ly had around 100 million monthly actives after 5 years. But one thing mattered enormously. Musical.ly had deep product knowledge and operating experience in the US. It had built the most important short video beachhead in America. Also, right after the merger, they actually maintained 2 apps in parallel for a while. Musical.ly's interface was white, so there was effectively a white TikTok and a black TikTok. They found the white one performed better, so they merged the black one into the white one, and then later turned the whole thing black again. In that sense, the TikTok people use today is actually built on the Musical.ly package.
So the physical base was Musical.ly.
Exactly. Then came the operational changes. The first major change was decentralization. TikTok removed the daily ranking charts. Musical.ly had a kind of hot list logic, like Weibo rankings. TikTok cut that out. Hot lists exaggerate head effects and make it harder for newcomers to enter. That was against ByteDance's philosophy. Push notifications were overhauled too. Under Musical.ly, human editors decided what kinds of things to push. TikTok switched to recommendation-driven pushes tailored to each user. The result was immediate. Just changing push logic doubled user usage time.
That's wild.
Product friction was also lowered. TikTok let you browse without registering. Not only that, it could already start collecting your behavioral data locally. And when you eventually signed up, it merged the profile in. So you didn't feel like you were starting from zero after registration.
Which makes it much easier to commit in the moment.
Exactly. And the overall product side still used the Douyin team, Ren Lifeng and others. Then, once again, they reached the familiar ByteDance stage. The product and strategy look good, so let's start pouring in money. In early 2019, Zhang Nan posted a bunch of photos on Weibo showing TikTok taking over landmark advertising sites in Dubai, London, Las Vegas, and other major cities. Same playbook as Douyin, giant ad buys everywhere. In China, that kind of move had worked brilliantly. In the US, it generated a giant backlash. Sure, lots of people downloaded the app, but the stuff inside TikTok looked bizarre to them. There was still a huge amount of lip syncing, which already felt weird. And the early creator base also included lots of subcultural communities that most ordinary users didn't understand at all, especially furry communities.
That one I know.
Right, furry. Dressing up as animals, not really cosplay of existing characters, but people acting out being wolf people or sheep people or horses. When people who weren't in that world opened TikTok and saw a feed full of that stuff, they thought, what kind of strange app is this?
If you are outside that circle, you can easily read it as kind of freakish.
Right, TikTok was advertising everywhere, and people started getting annoyed. Mocking the app became its own little meme culture. One famous joke was about the evolution of the Windows recycle bin. By 2019, the recycle bin icon had basically become the TikTok logo. The point was simple. People thought TikTok was trash.
Honestly, it sounds a bit like the urban elite reaction to early Kwai.
Very much so. Just a different social layer looking down from above. But then some parts of TikTok's growth path became oddly similar to Douyin's in China. The first major opening in the US also came through celebrities. In China, Yue Yunpeng had been an important early trigger for Douyin. In America, the equivalent was Jimmy Fallon. Fallon literally said on air, "I recently found a very cool app, TikTok. Have you heard of it?" Then he looked at the audience and said, "Okay, judging from your faces, apparently not. Go download it." At that point, some people accused him of being paid. Later, they found out he wasn't. Ellen mentioned it too, and she liked it for real. When a reporter asked Ellen whether TikTok had paid for the shoutout, she joked,
If TikTok wants to pay me, I can say it again.
Celebrities made people aware. But awareness isn't enough. You still need a participation format. Again, it had to be something visually striking and easy to imitate. In 2018, Red Dead Redemption 2 launched and triggered a huge cowboy craze. On TikTok, a creator named Michael Pelsha used Old Town Road as background music, dressed up as a cowboy, and did a little cowboy dance. It blew up. Suddenly, TikTok was full of cowboy dances. This was the American TikTok equivalent of Silly Silly. The symbolic centerpiece of that whole moment was Old Town Road itself. Before TikTok, it was just a modest track made by a 19-year-old unemployed kid living in low-income housing, chasing a rap dream. He bought the rights to a country sample for $30, rented studio time for $20, spent a total of $50 and made the song. It was originally just some unremarkable track. Then, it became the BGM everybody copied. After that, it hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed there for 19 consecutive weeks, breaking a more than 20-year record and becoming the longest-running number 1 song in chart history. It completely changed the kid's life, like a fairy tale. He wasn't even signed to a record label yet, just a solo creator, basically self-employed, and suddenly he's holding number 1 for 19 weeks. That had basically never happened before. At first, the chart system even seemed uncomfortable with how rough and earthy the track felt. And because the hip-hop element was so strong, they removed it from the country chart. But Billy Ray Cyrus personally came in, supported him, recorded a new version, and effectively forced the issue. Once Billy Ray Cyrus is on the track, how can anyone say it isn't country?
Hard to ban it after that.
Exactly. And after 2019, the music industry was permanently different. Once music distribution and breakout logic became tied to short video virality, the path changed. In China, you see the same thing. Truly mass breakout songs often don't explode because a singer is simply great in the old sense. They explode because they become short video BGMs, or because they ride a variety show, drama, or social event. That doesn't mean good music disappeared. It just means people's tastes got more fragmented, and the songs that become social mega hits need an extra event to push them there.
It's very relaxed.
But you can hear how much rap is embedded in it. And once Old Town Road happened, TikTok became unstoppable. That said, foreign competition didn't vanish. In summer 2019, Zuckerberg got asked directly at an internal all-hands whether the company was worried about TikTok.
Yeah.
He said the 2 core markets were the Indian market and the American market, and said Facebook would use a kind of surround the cities from the countryside strategy by starting in Mexico. The product was called Lasso, and honestly, it was exactly the kind of totally forgettable thing you'd expect. By the end of 2019, Lasso had more or less been abandoned, and Reels began trialing inside Instagram in Brazil.
Well, that wouldn't work. Quai already took over Brazil.
By 2020, Facebook's own COO, Sheryl Sandberg, was publicly saying the company was worried about TikTok because even her own kids were spending more time on TikTok than on Facebook. Facebook's strategic failure looked almost identical to Tencent's. First, it got in too late and badly underestimated TikTok. Second, it never really concentrated resources the way ByteDance did. Third, and this is maybe the most hilarious evidence, TikTok was actually one of Facebook's biggest advertising customers.
Oh wow.
Exactly, Facebook, as an ad platform, was helping TikTok grow while not fully understanding the threat. At one point, TikTok accounted for roughly $1 billion in Facebook ad spend over 3 years. The internal belief was that TikTok was probably just a flashy, money-burning fad. Facebook looked at early TikTok retention data and saw next-day retention around 30%. That wasn't promising. They also remembered ByteDance's earlier failed overseas information products and misread what was happening. Even Snapchat's founder, Evan Spiegel, initially said TikTok wasn't really a direct competitor. He gave this neat pyramid: pure entertainment at one layer, information in the middle, pure social at the top. In his framing, Snapchat and WhatsApp were pure social, YouTube and TikTok were pure entertainment, and Facebook and Instagram sat in the middle. Later, TikTok tore through the social media ad market, and Snapchat panicked and launched Spotlight to mimic TikTok.
TikTok was eating the ad spend because to advertisers, its efficiency was better. Snapchat's market cap fell from around $116 billion in 2021 to about $13 billion now, basically down to 1/10.
Reels, to be fair, didn't die. Since it's built directly into Instagram, it managed to survive. Today, on Instagram, video consumption already exceeds image text consumption. The video era really arrived. And then in 2020, TikTok caught another golden opportunity, the pandemic. TikTok's MAU graph basically became a rocket. It doubled in half a year because people were stuck at home with nothing to do. And once again, Jiang Yiming's instinct was all in. He used a phrase that captured the style perfectly: leave no gaps, suppress on all fronts. That wasn't just rhetoric, it translated into a specific operational target. If any competitor in any country's app store ranking gets ahead of us, kill it within a week. That level of redundancy, that willingness to pay almost any cost, mattered. Which brings up one of ByteDance's most important internal machines, the user growth team. At the broadest level, user growth means spending money effectively. The man associated with that inside ByteDance was Zhao Qi, often called the person who knows how to spend more money than anyone in the Chinese internet industry. The money that fueled Toutiao, Douyin, and TikTok flowed through his hands. I actually interviewed with his team once. Didn't end up joining, unfortunately, but he's legendary. There was a period when his skills weren't as needed because the big wars had eased. Then the AI era came, and suddenly the money-spending generals had a mission again. By some estimates, TikTok burned at least $10 billion between 2018 and 2020. That amount could have built an entire giant unicorn on its own somewhere else. ByteDance just used it to make sure the global short video war ended decisively in its favor. ByteDance itself later summarized TikTok's expansion into 4 clear stages, and the logic is very telling. Stage 1. Dump resources in without overthinking it. Just blast the market open. Stage 2. Build the content ecosystem, which usually means spending heavily to seed local creators. Stage 3. Push daily active penetration among registered users. Once that ratio gets to something like 20 to 30%, you've hit an inflection point and can begin reducing paid acquisition because natural growth starts taking over. Stage 4. Build brands steadily and monetize.
Very clean.
Extremely clean. And it worked country after country. This is where ByteDance's reusable engines mattered. One was user growth, how to spend. Another was recommendation algorithms. Another was commercialization, led by Zhang Lidong, which meant that once a market was standing firmly, the company knew how to squeeze serious money out of it. Add the engineering middle platform on top, and you basically had a 4-engine machine. The algorithm and growth side was associated with senior leaders like Yang Zhenyuan. The engineering platform had figures like Hong Dingkun. Commercialization had Zhang Lidong. Once that machine was built, Zhang Yiming could command it and say, all in, concentrate force, take the hill. Compare that with Kwai International, which reportedly changed leadership 5 separate times. Every new leadership batch had to start all over again in some way. With ByteDance, you can see the contrast immediately. Of course, content platforms going global also face problems that other businesses don't. They run into local culture and local policy. But even there, TikTok has some advantages relative to other types of global business. If you make hardware, you need carrier relationships. If you do e-commerce, you need logistics, labor relations, local delivery networks, government ties. If you do hard news or political media, you slam directly into religion, ethnicity, ideology, and social fault lines. TikTok, by contrast, started as an entertainment platform. If you keep a red line around gambling, drugs, porn, and locally sensitive legal issues and let the recommendation engine do the rest, you can still get the machine running without the platform itself understanding every nuance of every country. Jiang Yiming's basic idea was, we do the recommendation, we respect the legal and cultural red lines, and beyond that, users tell us what they want through behavior. And that logic was globally reusable. Add to that the fact that TikTok quickly became a money printing machine with extremely high ad efficiency and very low marginal cost. An underperforming ad could get replaced in seconds by a better performing one. That means conversion gets pushed toward an extreme optimum. Advertisers stay happy, and because the business is overwhelmingly online, the gross margin stays gorgeous.
Total data-driven optimization.
Exactly. Compare that with Didi, Meituan, Alibaba, businesses with big offline cost structures. TikTok's marginal cost of opening market number 100 is nowhere near as painful. Once the user base is stable, it becomes a very resilient machine. Which also means the company only really needs to handle the government and legal side properly. And of course, that turns out to be the tricky part, especially in the US. In February 2019, TikTok appointed its first local US head, someone responsible for managing local creators, who later became general manager for the US market. By June, a vice president who has spent 12 years at Facebook joined TikTok. Then, a senior Microsoft executive with 25 years of experience, Eric Anderson, came in as global general counsel. A former US Air Force operations security expert became global chief security officer. You can see the pattern. Hire heavyweight foreigners directly into leadership.
Yeah.
Originally, the overall overseas boss has still effectively been Zhang Nan, because TikTok was born as Douyin's international version. But once competition with Kuai and Tencent intensified domestically, Zhang Nan was pulled back to focus on China. That's why, during the 2018-2020 period of intense conflict, she returned to domestic operations. After she left the overseas side, TikTok's top leader became Zhu Jun for a while, which made sense because he came over from Musical.ly and understood that product deeply. And honestly, the fact that Zhu Jun stayed in the company for so long is itself not trivial. The Musical.ly co-founder remained in a key role all the way to today. He's now the product lead for Doubao. Zhang Nan later shifted away from the core TikTok business and toward innovative tools like CapCut. This is one place ByteDance's culture is genuinely different from some other companies. It can keep strong people and keep reusing them. When Zhu Jun was in charge of TikTok, people in the industry treated him as a genius product manager, the kind of person you'd compare to Yu Jun from Baidu or Zhang Xiaolong from WeChat. He just happened to be low-key with the long hair and wooden clogs and wandering monk vibe we mentioned earlier. Then the US government's attention intensified. From their perspective, this was a Chinese company building an enormous internet product on American soil. The real turning point came in late 2019 when the Trump administration began investigating ByteDance on the grounds that its acquisition of Musical.ly had not been properly reported to CFIUS. Yes, Musical.ly itself had Chinese founders too, but the US government now had its opening. To respond, in May 2020, ByteDance recruited Kevin Mayer, who had been leading Disney's streaming business and had even been seen as a possible Disney successor. He joined as TikTok CEO and ByteDance COO, reporting directly to Zhang Yiming. At the same time, teams in mainland China tied to local content authority were reduced or shifted. Some of the technically central teams that couldn't just be moved to America, like Zhu Wenjia's algorithm support functions, were resituated in Singapore as a kind of offshore support layer. But geopolitics wasn't only about the US. India blew up too. People probably remember this now. For Chinese internet companies, India became a disaster zone. TikTok in India was directly banned. And it wasn't just ByteDance. Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu, a bunch of Chinese tech firms got hit. In the second half of 2020, Trump demanded TikTok be shut down or split off. Mayer looked at the situation and realized the risk was totally uncontrollable. After only 3 months, he
Nobody
quit.
had dealt with a situation like that before.
Exactly. The whole company was gloomy because everything felt possible. Zhang Yiming's response, though, was to drag things out. Lawsuits, procedural resistance, delay tactics. He tried every legal method possible to avoid a direct shutdown. And in a sense, Kevin Mayer left too early because Trump soon lost the election and the situation changed again. In April 2021, after a long period of review and reflection, Zhang Yiming finally chose a successor for TikTok, Shou Zichu, who had been president of Xiaomi's international division.
Made a full circle and came over.
It was a highly synthesized choice. He's Singaporean, so not mainland born.
He's ethnically Chinese, so he still carries an East Asian cultural link. He's extremely international, speaks English perfectly, can talk to the West, but also understands China. And Zhang Yiming knew of him from back then at Jingxiu Jiayuan. Once Shou joined, TikTok's top management increasingly took on a non-Chinese face. The music head had come from Sony and Warner. More and more of the visible leadership were foreign executives. But then Trump came back and things got messy all over again. In March 2024, the US passed another law aimed specifically at TikTok and ByteDance. A lot happened after that. We cover the details elsewhere, so we won't unpack every step here. The short version is, TikTok escaped another near-death experience. ByteDance remained the largest shareholder, though it ceded some control and voice. TikTok survived. Which brings us to the last chapter, the Empire Era. At this point, ByteDance is a gigantic creature. It is very obviously a true giant now, and obviously not just because of short video. Short video and Toutiao held the base traffic. In reality, Douyin became the real base, and then several monsters grew out of that traffic foundation. Zhang Yiming has always believed in scale effects. Back in 2016, he explicitly said at an internal meeting, "Why did the total market cap of US tech still rise by 19% even though a lot of companies got cut in half? Because Google and Facebook rose. Therefore, we must become a giant."
In 2016, Taobao Live launched, and streamer sellers like Li Jiaqi and Weiya took off. At that stage, Douyin was still in growth mode, and its relationship with e-commerce and live stream platforms was relatively friendly. Short video could still act as traffic that got exported to other platforms. In 2018, Douyin and Taobao even cooperated for a year. Back then, if you saw the little shopping cart on Douyin, one click could take you to Taobao to buy.
Pretty amazing to think about now.
Then on April 1st, 2020, Luo Yonghao began live streaming on Douyin and immediately became the first real standard bearer for Douyin live commerce. Sales broke 100 million RMB on day one. That example mattered enormously. As we said earlier, Zhang Yiming needs to see a template. Once he saw it, he was stunned. And then the cannons fired again, money started pouring. He elevated live streaming and e-commerce to the group's top priority. That same year, the Douyin e-commerce brand was formally announced, and the company began building the whole stack in-house. In-house here means the full chain: goods, payments, logistics, everything. Douyin e-commerce was upgraded to a first-level department, reporting directly upward. It was peeled away from just being part of Douyin and placed under Bob Kang Ziyu, whom we mentioned earlier. Product, payment, logistics, everything got rebuilt as a system. TikTok followed with its own e-commerce module in 2021, and later even added a marketplace-style mall tab at the top level. So they weren't just doing so-called interest commerce anymore. They were moving toward direct shelf-based competition with Taobao. In 2022, Douyin e-commerce hit 1 trillion RMB GMV. In 2024, it reached 3.5 trillion. In 2025, it's somewhere around 4.2 to 4.5 trillion. The really scary part is that the not very promising shelf commerce portion now accounts for more than 50%. In other words, browsing and searching for goods on Douyin has become mainstream behavior, not just a side effect of live streams.
So it isn't all happening in a live stream room anymore.
Exactly. People used to argue there was no room left because Taobao, Pinduoduo, and JD had already divided up the cake. Douyin still forcibly carved out a huge new slice because the attention black hole is just that powerful. If that many people spend that much time there, you only need to convert a small portion of them to create a giant market. TikTok Shop, relatively speaking, is weaker. But even there, by 2025, it's around $100 billion in scale. That puts it roughly at the level of Temu globally. It is still already one of the world's largest e-commerce platforms, behind Amazon, Walmart, and Shopee, but ahead of eBay and effectively number 4. The second giant category beyond commerce is live streaming more broadly, especially game streaming. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. After Douyu got into serious trouble when its CEO was arrested on drug-related charges, lots of creators flow to Douyin. People joked, when Douyu falls, Douyin gets fed. Then in 2024, after the great reconciliation between Tencent and ByteDance, Tencent formally allowed games like Honor of Kings and PUBG to be streamed on Douyin. That instantly made Douyin the biggest game livestream platform in China. Once again, they used the traffic black hole logic. In show-style live streaming too, it's right up there with Kwai, well above Momo or Bilibili. We won't expand on that here, but the point is simple. Douyin is now one of China's biggest live platforms in every sense.
Then there's local services. As early as 2018, Douyin had already introduced LBS aggregation pages, basically proto-group buy and merchant info layers. By 2022, it had partnered with Ele.me, similar to how it had once partnered with Taobao. Later that same year, it launched Douyin Like, a merchant management and local services layer that feels a bit like Dianping. By 2025, Douyin's local services GMV had reached around 800 to 900 billion RMB, making it firmly China's number 2 local services business. I've personally been influenced by it plenty of times. Sometimes you go to a store and the staff literally tell you, place the order on Douyin, it's cheaper there.
Which means even if you don't usually browse there for that, you learn the path anyway.
Exactly. And what really makes local services different in the video era is that video conveys far more than text and images. You can pan around the restaurant, show the decor, the dishes, the atmosphere. People can feel the place much more directly. That's one reason local services through Douyin became so scary so fast. Beyond commerce, local services, and live streaming, ByteDance also kept trying to expand its content empire in other directions. Dongchedi started as Toutiao's auto channel and became an independent app in 2017. There were later rumors about an IPO and valuations around $3 billion, though nothing fully concrete has emerged. Pipixia, which appeared after Neihan Duanzi was shut down, still exists but is clearly no longer a priority. Huoshan was eventually absorbed too. In 2020, it first became Douyin Huoshan Edition, and later coexisted for a while with Douyin Lite. Douyin Lite was less about cutting content and more about adding gold coin earning mechanics for lower tier users. Then there's Tomato Novel. Launched in 2019, it went straight at Tencent's Yuewen with an aggressive free plus ads model. That was overwhelmingly effective. With recommendation algorithms, pre-installs, and traffic diverted from Toutiao and Douyin, Tomato scaled very quickly, 10 million DAU in 2020, 20 million in 2021, and by September 2025, around 245 million MAU. Tomato Listen, the audio extension of the novel business, had around 95 million MAU, nearly 100 million people listening to fiction through it.
That is huge!
Then there's Hongguo Short Drama. Same playbook, free model, heavy recommendation, enormous scale. ByteDance is now number 1 in short drama, with Hongguo at around 240 million MAU and over 100 million DAU, which already puts it above platforms like Bilibili and RedNote on daily use. Even Soda Music has become a meaningful player. Its monthly users are somewhere around 120 to 140 million, making it one of the major music apps in China. And its logic is pure ByteDance, recommendation first, ad supported, task supported, very frictionless. What this shows is that ByteDance is especially strong at short, frequent use content, content that fits a free plus ad model, and content that resonates strongly with broad, lower tier, and mass market users. When a content category fits those conditions, ByteDance is terrifying. When it doesn't, the machine struggles more. That's why products like Xigua Video and Wukong Q&A never really reached the same level. Xigua once had more than 15 million DAU, and ByteDance loudly announced huge budgets to poach creators, but medium and long-form video never fully fit the flywheel. Xigua content later got repackaged again under Douyin Selected, which itself hints at ByteDance's broader logic now. If Douyin is a black hole for traffic, then maybe longer content can simply be attached to that black hole rather than forced to live independently. Wukong Q&A was similar. It launched in 2017 with lots of noise and money spent poaching Zhihu heavyweights, but its user profile skewed older, more male, more lower tier, more entertainment seeking. It simply didn't align with Zhihu's core content culture, and ByteDance's growth engines were a poor fit. After that come a bunch of businesses that were once treated as ByteDance's 3 great dreams: education, games, and social. Education was one of the most controversial. Around 2020, ByteDance pushed hard on education hardware,
especially the Dali Smart Study Lamp, which sold for 749 RMB each and got heavily advertised. The lamp had a camera and a screen and was supposed to do homework supervision, posture correction, assisted tutoring, parent-like companionship. The pitch was that the lamp could become the traffic opening, the household gateway.
That's some big ambition.
Definitely.
But education is deeply entangled with policy, and whether ByteDance could really keep pushing there was always questionable.
Then games. Back in 2019, when Toutiao traffic was already huge, ByteDance created Ohio, not MiHoYo, Ohio, to work on self-developed games, publishing, and distribution, especially casual and minigame types that fit naturally into Toutiao and Douyin traffic. Then, from 2021 to 2023, news started leaking about layoffs and turbulence. Casual games had hit a ceiling. Around the same time, ByteDance also built Nuverse, spent something like $4 billion acquiring Moonton, hired aggressively in Beijing, Shanghai, Hangzhou, and Shenzhen, and at one point had over 3,000 people. They launched titles like Crystal of Atlan, Earth Revival, and One Piece Bloodroots. By 2021, according to one game industry media outlet, ByteDance's game division had 2,000 people, more than a dozen studios, 4 publishing platforms, and 29 companies under the umbrella. Then in 2023, ByteDance announced a major contraction in games. CEO Liang Rubo was quite blunt. Game development is capital-intensive, long cycle, uncertain, and not very synergistic with ByteDance's core capabilities. They spun off or cut large numbers of non-core studios. They still do have successes like Crystal of Atlan, which brought in impressive first-month cash flows, maybe 1.5 to 2 billion RMB. But you can't assume every game can achieve that. And strategically, the more important thing is relative advantage. If you're a giant traffic platform, why insist on building the game yourself instead of partnering with game companies that specialize at it? It's like us deciding to build a Mercedes ourselves instead of partnering with a car maker.
Makes sense.
So shrinking games was the rational choice.
Then, they focused on social networking. ByteDance's social media attempts are a famous industry story. In 2019, it launched Duoshan, focused on video updates among friends. Then, Feiliao, focused on interest-based social networking. Then Party Island, which leaned toward the Animal Crossing/metaverse vibe. Different teams kept exploring. The Duoshan team later even built Douyin's Little Flame feature, the little street creature you keep alive if you message someone every day.
Explain that one.
It's basically a private message street pet. If 2 people keep chatting, the little flame stays alive. It doesn't really do anything, but its DAU reportedly passed 100 million.
Compare that to Alipay's built-in Ant-Man game then.
Right, same genre of lightweight digital companion. But social as a category doesn't really fit ByteDance's deepest instincts. I don't like using the word genes too much, but if anything truly clashes with ByteDance's temperament, it's social networking products. ByteDance isn't especially driven by deep human value reflection or subtle relationship insight. It's driven by data. Social products are much harder to brute force with data alone. That's why people kept calling education, games, and social ByteDance's 3 great dreams. Dreams, yes, but often very foggy ones.
Big dreams indeed.
Feishu is another big one. Feishu's product experience is genuinely excellent, and ByteDance stayed patient with it much longer than with education, games, or social. The problem is that advanced enterprises, the kind of companies that can really use Feishu well, are not numerous enough in the Chinese market. Not advanced in some moral sense, advanced in the sense of workflow maturity, digitization, management discipline. Feishu makes high demands on the people using it. If you don't recruit very strong people, you can buy the product and still not extract much value from it.
The threshold is high, the average person won't know what to do with it.
Very high. So the cycle is long and the diffusion is hard. I once wrote publicly that DingTalk was in some ways doing better precisely because it was more down to earth. And that article annoyed both sides. DingTalk people said, "How dare you say our experience is worse?" And Feishu people said, "How dare you say we can't make it?" Classic lose-lose essay. People also almost forget now about the metaverse wave. Besides Party Island, there was Pico. In August 2021, ByteDance spent about 9 billion RMB to acquire the VR company Pico and aimed it directly at Facebook's Oculus. But once the metaverse wave cooled and AI heated up, the company naturally shrank Pico too. More broadly, what you feel from all this is that ByteDance is an extremely high-energy company. If you want to describe a person as high energy or low energy, ByteDance is a very high-energy person. That's what drives its terrifying efficiency. But the downside is equally obvious. High-energy people often have trouble with very long-term uncertain bets. Gaming is the perfect example. You need the kind of conviction MiHoYo or Game Science had, the willingness to burn money for years before a result appears. For ByteDance, a period where you can't judge the next move is very uncomfortable. That's cultural. Some of the other product clusters it built have still done quite well. Volcano Engine on the enterprise side, CapCut on the creator side, acquired products like Feisu, Jimeng, Qingyan Camera, Xingtu, Soda Music. I realized when I reviewed my own habits that I'm actually a paying user of several ByteDance products already. The next truly important area is obviously AI, Daobao, Jimeng, and so on. We're not expanding on that here, but ByteDance's brute force miracle style is definitely useful in AI. The company knows how to grow products, knows how to spend to recruit technical talent, and has the ruthlessness for it. But some of the recommendation and commercialization experience from the previous era doesn't transfer one-to-one, so we still have to watch how it plays out. Let's talk about one especially interesting ByteDance product, the company itself. In 2015, Zhang Yiming posted on Weibo, develop a company as a product. In other words, operate the organization itself like a highly flexible, efficient product. Where do you see that? First, extreme flatness. For a long time, even with tons of people, the company had only one real private office, Zhang Yiming's. Everyone else sat in the open. There wasn't much visible hierarchy. It wasn't the kind of big company culture where everyone is constantly aware of who outranks whom by 2 or 3 grades.
At least not in a very visible way.
Right, and because of that, interns could challenge managers in meetings. If the data supported them, they could say, I don't agree. The ultimate authority was supposed to be the numbers. On the positive side, that creates energy and honesty. On the negative side, it can feel cold. There isn't much room for sentimental seniority. You can see that in how ByteDance treated veterans too. Inside Douyin, for example, different people had different views of who really made the product. Some would say Zhuan drove the key business details. Others would say Zhang Nan happened to catch the right era. Still others would say both of them benefited from timing. ByteDance had a long-running internal phrase, old hands do new businesses, new hands do old businesses. So when the company felt like moving you, it moved you. Sometimes with nothing more than a facial notice. That's one of the least human warmth aspects of ByteDance culture. Once Douyin was built, the people who built it didn't necessarily get to keep stable ownership of it forever. Zhuan got moved to Xigua, Zhang Nan went to Feishu, Han Shangyou went to live streaming. Later, Zhang Nan moved again. In another company, once you'd built the core business, maybe you'd be rewarded with some stable territory. ByteDance is less like that. It prioritizes deployment over sentiment. There are pros and cons. Nothing is purely good or bad. And of course, now that ByteDance is so enormous, it's no longer as flat or as purely truth-seeking as it once was. In 2020, Zhang Yiming became global CEO, while Zhang Nan and Zhang Lidong took on major China side roles. In 2021, Zhang Yiming stepped down as CEO and chairman, with Liang Rubo taking over. That timing was strikingly close to Colin Wang's own early retreat from Pinduoduo. By early 2024, Zhang Nan had stepped down as China CEO to focus on Jianying and mobile AI, and Zhang Lidong became the true number one for China. Finally, let's return to the question we started with, the money. According to reporting at the end of 2025, Xu Xin's Capital Today led a new round at an implied valuation of about $480 billion. Since ByteDance isn't public, exact figures vary. Some people say low 300 billions, others say 400 plus billion. But 400 something is the rough consensus range.
Sounds plausible.
It does, because ByteDance now makes more money than Tencent. Revenue is roughly in the $180 to $200 billion range, and net profit around $50 billion. That's dollars. In RMB terms, we're talking multiple trillions in annual revenue and several hundred billion in profit. It is a money printing machine. Compared with Tencent and Alibaba, its marginal cost is lower because so much of the business is purely digital. Yes, e-commerce and local services make the picture somewhat more complex now, but the underlying structure is still extremely profitable. Tencent, the famous public market money printer, is around $110 billion in annual revenue and perhaps $35 to $38 billion in net profit. ByteDance is already ahead in revenue and ahead in profit, but Tencent's market cap is still around $700 billion, meaning the market still prices Tencent above ByteDance. That's not simply because ByteDance isn't listed. It's because investors still believe Tencent is more diversified and more stable. Tencent has WeChat, QQ, games, and a whole spread of mature modes. ByteDance, even with all the products we just named, still has an enormous amount of pressure concentrated on Douyin. The traffic, the commerce, the B2B products, the novels, the short dramas, it all links very heavily on that one foundation.
The hierarchy of importance is still pretty clear.
Exactly. But even with that caveat, ByteDance is already absolutely in the new BAT class. It clearly displays Baidu in that trio. Let me end with a personal reflection. I don't really watch short videos much myself. As a content creator, I often feel short video forces too much golden 3 seconds thinking. You need a sensational opening line immediately. If I try to turn a business story into a 15-second or 1-minute short, the first sentence would have to be something like, Starbucks is finished, or you don't understand ByteDance and you never will. It pushes creators toward exaggerated hooks.
Your imitation is pretty good though.
But it feels uncomfortable to create that way, and the creator ecosystem is brutal too. Douyin influencers rise in waves and disappear in waves. If your numbers start slipping, the traffic can vanish almost overnight. Since distribution is fundamentally algorithmic, once the algorithm stops liking you, what exactly are you supposed to do?
That definitely keeps people anxious all the time.
Buildings go up fast, banquets happen fast, but they collapse fast too. Yet from the platform's point of view, the combined share of internet time spent on Douyin, channels, and Kuai now accounts for more than 40% of Chinese people's online time. That's nearly half of the pie. Open the phone, and for an enormous share of people, their default choice of entertainment is short video form content. That's reality. Recommendation algorithms are black boxes, but they're still reflecting real demand in some deep sense.
Though maybe our own listeners experience that reality somewhat differently.
Definitely. Our listeners, many of them in first-tier cities, may dislike Douyin more than average. Especially people in media or the content world, some of them strongly dislike Zhang Yiming too, because they feel he helped create a scroll culture that lowers people's cognitive level. That criticism exists. But the deeper question is, did Zhang Yiming create the short video era, or did the era choose Zhang Yiming? I lean strongly toward the latter. If there hadn't been Zhang Yiming, it might have been Li Yiming or Wang Yiming. The age itself had already arrived. Mobile internet had spread to the masses. The old channels controlled by elite editors had weakened. The old era where professional intellectual gatekeepers set the tone and standards of content was ending. The aesthetics of everyday majority human life, messier, more direct, more instinctive, were coming onto the table. That's the era Toutiao, Douyin, and Kuai belong to. It even has some strange echoes with how Donald Trump became US president. Broad media and broad public mood shifted, and elite gatekeeping weakened. From an organizational point of view, ByteDance really is a new kind of creature for this era. People vote with every click. The company that can iterate hardest against actual human behavior is the one that gets the biggest dividend. There's a wonderful closing line in Zhang Xiaojun's article, Inside TikTok, Zhang Yiming's Journey on the Giant Wave. He interviewed a lot of people close to Zhang Yiming. The ending goes something like this. Roll time back 12 years to when Zhang Yiming and Liang Rubo had just finished their previous company, Zhouju Fang. In 2010, the company's second year, Zhang Yiming watched The Social Network and left a short note on Douban. The word that left the deepest impression on him was obsession. And just as he later led TikTok against the current, perhaps in this world, if you are not devoured by desire, then maybe you can devour desire in one bite.
That's where I want to leave the ByteDance story. And one more small thing. Zhang Yiming's Douban account apparently still exists. If you search one bird, you can still find the nickname Zhang Yiming. He watched a lot of movies. The funniest part is that he gave low ratings to almost every Wong Kar-wai film, which totally fits his style. He's very rational. The more emotional, atmospheric stuff just doesn't speak to him. And if you look at his marks and little comments, in many ways, he's extremely ordinary. He watched lots of classic films like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Goodfellas. His little notes sound like the kind of ordinary muttering any of us might leave online. He's not some mythical superhuman. It's just that in certain dimensions, obsession, rationality, he differs from ordinary people enough to become the person he became.
Near the end, one thing really hit me while listening to all this. A lot of people criticize algorithms and information cocoons as if the algorithm is a bad thing doing something to us, trapping us in a fake world. But what you are really saying is that if the algorithm is part of some plot, then we are part of weaving that plot too. We can't simply step outside and blame some external evil machine or evil group or evil person for tricking us. I recently saw a line that moved me. Don't direct too much hatred toward huge, vague, hollow things. That's what weak people do. People in every era complain that morals have declined and the world has gone bad. It doesn't solve anything. But if you identify a concrete problem and point to a concrete person doing a concrete thing wrong, then you at least have a place to push. Then you know what you can actually do next.
We really do tend to invent imaginary enemies sometimes. We turn it into a cartoon. Oh, Zhang Yiming did this. Therefore, Zhang Yiming is bad. Therefore, everything bad that followed is because of him. Reality is never that simple.
I would have instinctively assumed that once the next generation of devices or interfaces arrives, once the phone is replaced by some new thing, then the next platform would obviously replace what we're seeing now. But your answer was basically not yet. At least for a pretty long stretch that we can currently see, short video may still remain the main vessel that carries people's time.
Right, we're used to change happening quickly. Radio, then television, then the internet, then text and pictures, then short video, then long video. So people naturally imagine something new must be just around the corner. But right now, that next thing is not clearly visible. AI may change certain things, sure, but as for where people actually spend their attention, there still isn't any strong industry consensus that something will clearly replace video in the way that video was visibly poised to replace earlier forms around 2013.
So whether you're a content consumer or a content creator, you probably do have to think very seriously about what your next move is.
Exactly.
Alright then, today's ending song.
The ending track is a nice fit. It came out in 2013, right around the moment Mindy was born and Musical.ly was starting its pivot, the year Vertigo short video really began to take shape. The song is My Sky by Nanzheng Beizhan. I liked it a lot back then, and some of the lyrics really do fit ByteDance's atmosphere. I wouldn't be surprised if people building Douyin back then were listening to it too. It was genuinely very popular.
Oh, absolutely. It was everywhere. Alright, let's go.
再见我的爱 I wanna say goodbye 再见我的过去 I want a new life 再见我的眼泪得到和失败再见那个年少轻狂的时代再见我的烦恼不再孤单再见我的懦弱不再哭喊 All I wanna say Hello Hello 我的未来 Hello Hello 在无尽的黑夜所有都快要毁灭至少我还有梦也为你而感动原来黎明的起点就在我的心里面只要我还有梦就会
多年，我才读懂了家人的眼泪，发现原来自己没有说再见的勇气，离别的伤感感染了满城的空气。
失去后才知道那些有多么的珍贵，亲爱的朋友们是否已经展翅纷飞？不飞到高处，怎么开阔自己的视野？你已经长大了，快告诉全世界！
外面的世界散发着强大的磁场，诱惑着每一双即将张开的翅膀，热烈的火在梦中中凶猛的燃烧，美丽的火花在恋人的周围环绕。这过程很美，尽管有无奈和失落，刻骨铭心的